that by drawing for a mini tournament. This was an idea pitched to us by Sleek's Bowl. So it is the Sleek's Bowl, or familiarly known as the Trashfire Tournament, based on some of the submissions. We're gonna be playing some rough stuff against each other. We're gonna do a drawing for that at the very end, and we'll play that and get back to you with the results. But let's talk some Underworlds. We are going to skip our usual segments to start, and we're just going to drop right into this. So we will cast your mind back all the way to late November of 2018. That's the debut episode of the podcast. I will just I'll preface this by saying that at the time there was only one other podcast that was as well known. I think Battle for Salvation actually started recording about the same time, but they were doing it on Twitch or something crazy. So their first 3 or 4 episodes were like not saved and not available very easily. So they may have started about the same time as us, but at the time it was Claim the City was the only one out there. And I'd been thinking about doing something for quite a while, but finally found somebody willing to kind of jump in with me, with Phil, and we went for it. The context of that, we had just seen the first Forsaken and Restricted list. It was like a banned and restricted list is what they were calling it still at that time. The Forsaken term didn't come along for a while. That was a big, we think of it as just like the DNA of the game. I mean, fellas, Skylar and Brian and Josh, you've never known the game to not have that, right?
Right. That is correct.
But for us, it was a big deal, and it was especially a big deal because there were such powerful cards in that first season. There were cards that desperately needed to be restricted because decks, faction cards were so weak and universal cards were so strong. The decks really started looking very similar, where you'd have a couple of faction cards and then kind of the same, maybe 24 universals. So big deal there.
I'll never forget
Go ahead.
Getting hit by my first FAR because we joined in Beastgrave, and the game was due for a FAR after we had been playing for a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I was really picking up on the game when the FAR targeted like 10 or 11 picks out of my deck.
It was rough. But our first episode topic was push ploys, and I'm actually kind of proud of this because I at the time I've told this story a bunch. You know, the very first games I played, I was like pulling sidestep out of the deck because I was like, who cares about one space? But this was the kind of thing we're doing. It's like, hey, like this is stuff that is important. It's debate worthy, and we reference this episode a lot. It doesn't 100% hold up because I think we tried to like march our way through every push ploy that existed in the game at the time. Yeah. Most of which don't anymore. But the importance of push is a big deal. And the last piece of trivia I wanted to hit on this is the episode art on this episode. It's terrible, but I have left it in place. It is the concept art that I sent to our in-house artist, Eric, to kind of come up with something decent. So it's this crude black and white, like MS Paint sort of construction. But I've thought often about replacing it, but I've chosen to leave it there for posterity. So
absolutely the right choice.
Yeah. That's also how we got started. Phil, episode 2, this is another way to reinforce kind of what we're about.
Yeah. And before we move on, I was even just having thought about push ploys that it's probably something we should revisit because push has changed so much since back then. There's kind of a lot to talk about and how it's adjusted, but
that's true.
That'll be a future topic for sure.
I think we'll find a number of topics that we feel like revisiting here.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually one for episode 2 that we've revisited a couple of different times in different ways. Mm-hmm. But this is our community resources episode. This was something that we actually just sort of cover more generically now in the beginning of each episode. But we were trying to make sure that we were like, hey, what else is out there if you want content for this game, and just trying to make sure we cover what other people are doing. At the time, as Davey mentioned, we had Claim the City and Battles for Salvation. I don't know if there were any blogs yet at this time. If they did exist, I don't remember what they would have been. But this was pre-Night Vault, so like there wasn't even that many topics to cover at this point in the game. So it's not entirely surprising that there was not a huge volume of content at this point.
To be clear, I actually believe that we are. It's a little hazy, but I think Nightvault is out at this time, that late, and we may or may not have received Eyes of the Nine and Gits. They're kind of arriving as we're doing these.
The box was probably just out, but yeah, I mean, hardly even digested it yet at this point.
Sure. Magic was still very new.
The good old days.
And now people are like, what's Magic? Once again, third end phase. I was being cute here. Episode 3, third end phase. Get it? Haha. It was at a time again where we could kind of go through everything. One thing I noticed going back through these episodes, and I was kind of listening to the first 5 minutes or so, is, man, how rough I can't believe people stuck with us through this sound quality. It was really bad. And it's embarrassing how long that continues, mostly because of episodes where I accidentally record on like a headphone earbud mic, because of some of the finicky things from Zencaster, which will switch your microphone if you're not paying attention. So, this is still at the time where we're just picking a real specific topic and going for it. Even right from the start, I was looking. I forgot that we really went every 2 weeks right from the start. We weren't ironclad on it, but that's been something we've kind of stuck with for a long time.
Yeah.
Episode 4. This is how timely we were. It took us like 4 episodes to get to something that was a big seismic change for the game at the time. What do we hit on this one?
Yeah, well, we're talking the banned and restricted list, breaking down some of like what are the impacts of the changes. And this was the first episode where Aaron joined us. Haven't had him on in an episode in a hot minute. But I know he's still buying all of the stuff, so I'm sure he knows everything, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, this will become a recurring topic that we do. As Davey mentioned, not exactly super timely, but I think if I kind of remember, we had some of these early ideas kind of laid out and like scheduled, and then like, oh, this banned and restricted list hits, and we didn't have that planned for. So instead of shifting suddenly to cover that, we just sort of stuck it on later. We've certainly gotten better about being more flexible, but certainly a turning point, and something that has become a welcome sight now as opposed to a big surprise.
Mm-hmm. Episode 5, we're preparing for Wapaka. Aaron is also going to that with us, and Wapaka was actually our first Grand Clash, although we barely knew what that meant at the time. And I don't know that even the organizers did either. So that was our first, was all the way back in 2018. These other fellas took them till 2022 to get a clash in, right? You guys hopped in at a rough time.
Yep, we were preparing for our first one to be in 2020.
Oh dear.
Yeah, well, we will certainly talk about that when we get there. But Grand Clashes at the time, like this concept, I think maybe outside of like the UK where you could go and play at Warhammer World and stuff, the idea of a Grand Clash wasn't very well solidified even, because it was like, oh, what's this? But we, quickly realized that, oh, there's actually like significant support for this game. They're doing big trophies and made a big difference between just a tournament and a Grand Clash. And certainly something to look forward to. I know, I can't even really remember. I feel like we didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into with PACA.
Yeah.
It's Underworlds wasn't their main thing. I don't know that they're still running.
I was going to say, I've heard about Wapaka, but I haven't heard about it recently. Where was that at?
Well, Wapaka.
Wapaka, Wisconsin.
It is now defunct. The fellas from Point Hammered were the ones who kind of ran that. Although there's been talk recently of it being raised from the ashes or reanimated, Dying to Low style with a force dynamic
jolt of energy.
Yeah. So we shall see. But as was the case with a lot of coverage during the years where Grand Clashes were out there, a lot of our coverage and a lot of other creators would cover lead up to and follow on from Grand Clashes, and we'll see that a little bit, where it was kind of a big deal, or you'd be tracking like, okay, this Grand Clash is happening, like who's doing what warbands are doing well, who's in the lead, and it was kind of this exciting spectator sport to hear what's going on. We really haven't had a chance to recapture that in the meantime, because there haven't been the events, or the numbers have been down.
Well, and is that also at this time was resources like Warhammer Underworlds database available? Because that tracks a lot of the deck data.
That's a good question.
Because if that wasn't available, then I could totally understand where people are like, oh, what's the tournament decks? And you actually had to pay attention live, or else you were going to miss all that.
It came on relatively soon. I remember using it for quite a while, and we start shouting him out pretty early on. But it was, there wasn't as robust a community around it, so it was more difficult to get some of that information. So
just pulling it up right now, the tournament decks on DB, unless they backfilled a lot, I think it was around, because the first tournament decks that they have on the website are the Blood and Glory 2017 Grand Clash.
2017. Tell me this, guys, and I know you can just look it up. Who do you think, what faction won the very first Grand Clash ever?
The very first. And you said that was in 2017?
2017.
Sepulchral Guard.
It is Sepulchral Guard.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
For a while, Sepulchral Guard had been the only faction to ever win a Grand Clash. So.
Oh my!
For a hot minute, yeah.
Good for them. Really get in there early. Get in there early when there's only 3 other possibilities.
Right.
Absolutely. It's pretty interesting stuff. Actually, I look back at this, but yes, and so we were prepping. Davey, do you remember what you played?
Yeah, definitely. I played Reavers. I played Reavers Flex build like you do.
Yeah.
So I think I had Reavers with some like whole. I can't remember if I had like hold particular objective numbers, but I did have Supremacy in there, and it was just for if people diagonaled me or longboarded me, I'm like, I'll stand on these, get a bunch of glory, and then come flying in afterwards once I'm powered up. So
truly shocking stuff.
Yeah.
And I was playing Eyes of the Nine, doing hold and magic. and Aaron was a pure hold objective spike claws with no attack stuff whatsoever. The entire deck was pushes, move tech, defensive tech.
Yeah.
Wild days.
So as we often do, there would be the lead up and the follow up. So episode 5 is the lead up. Episode 6 is the recap. It did give us some of the origin of like the Davey got Annihilation scored on him by Iron Jaws on there. I know that comes up every once in a while. I got some swag for coming in 4th in that, and it's some pretty rare swag now. So I for a while I was just like using like whatever, this is some interesting stuff, and then like the collector part of your brain starts realizing like, oh, this is actually some. I should not be putting wear and tear on these things. So they've been sealed up for a while. But there was kind of a seismic event of its own happening on this weekend, and we kind of talk about it in the next. So Phil, what did we cover episode 7 here?
Yeah, so right after Wapaka, or basically the exact same weekend, we get Molog's Mob and Godsworn Hunt, because this was back when you got releases as 2 warbands at once. They're more spread out, but you'd get more at one time. And we broke down Molog, and we we have a note here. This is our first episode where we broke from our under 30 minutes tag, which is hilarious because to date, at this point, we still had not managed to accomplish an episode in under 30. So I guess it is a good thing we dropped it. But
finally gave in, realized that the joke was on us. Fellas, can you imagine a world in which Molag was new?
I'm really curious to pick y'all's brains and probably just go back and revisit the episode. But what did you think? Like, did you think, hey, this is going to be a gatekeeper in every tournament?
No. I think my specific quote is that, and we were trying to make Molly G be a.
We wanted that to be the thing.
Yeah, we didn't have enough influence to make that happen. So,
well, we've got 5 people now. We could probably make it a thing.
All right, we'll see what we can do. But I think I specifically said the arrival of Molag is making everybody fussy, and as is often our take on this stuff is like the internet blows up, and we usually I don't know if it's the impulse to be devil's advocate or to tone down hyperbole, but I think we probably underestimated just how big an impact he'd be.
Yeah.
As long as I've been in the game, he's been a bit of a legend.
Well, and this was pre any changes to how he worked, so he was pretty crazy, but we didn't quite see it. I think part of it is that when you do these reviews, when they first come out, you're just kind of breaking down cards and you haven't really seen a lot of play yet. Right. And some of his cards are true trash. So like, on first evaluation, it's like, I don't see how he's going to be all that bad. And then it's like, oh, now I see why he's so bad. And actually at the time, there was some pretty nuts stuff that you could put from the universal pool in with them. I distinctly remember a game that we played, Davey, where you had stuff on him where he was like pushing after every attack and he was getting like extra some sort of way to like get extra dice and
there's like Vampiric Blade or something where he could heal himself, and then I had one where he could push after people attacked him instead of being driven back. So
so you had both where it was like, I make an attack, I can push. If I get attacked, I can push. And it was just like, oh my god.
Maybe I'm misremembering, but wasn't Librarian Molag a thing?
It was, but not yet at this point.
That's later.
But did the Vampire Molag win a tournament?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
So Molag was always like, you had to be ready for him, but he very rarely could win tournaments because enough people knew like, okay, if I can like hold enough objectives or stay away from him, I can outglory him.
Well, and in these stages as well, his attack, like there was only an aggro build for him.
Yep.
And if you missed your first few attacks and didn't develop any glory to spend, then you just stalled out. And that was relatively rare, but it would happen. It would probably happen at least once over the course of a tournament and then cost you that tournament. So.
Yeah.
So and then not to forget Josh's point, was Tomes Molag a thing immediately or was that later?
No, because Tomes had to come in through the rest of the Night Vault season before they were all out and available.
Once they were all out, though, Carlin figured that out right away, right?
Yeah. You needed also a mad scientist to kind of get in there and sort that out. So.
I love that has been immortalized in card art.
That's true. That's true.
I can't remember the name of the card, but I know there's an objective out there with Molag reading a book and two Skaven in the corner. Like, are you going to go?
All right. So big deal with Molly G, but our next episode is a bit of a back to what we'd sort of been doing in these early days. Davey, what were we doing?
Yeah, so this is, and I kind of would like to come back to some of this. We did this a lot more early on, and it'd be fun to kind of take this sort of specific deep dive. This was we looked at random ploys. So this is again with that smaller card pool. We looked all the ploys at the time because I guess gambits also would count here, but I mean they I don't know if they were calling them that, but spells existed in Night Vault. But point being, we looked at all cards that didn't have a guaranteed effect. So one One real common one was, I think, Frozen in Time, where you had a 50-50 to just lock a fighter out for the rest of the round.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's a Denial card where it was a 50-50 to counterspell something where you just cancel somebody else's gambit. There were a couple lines of thinking at the time. One was like, why would you ever include something that wasn't guaranteed to go off? And another being like, hey, these abilities are so powerful that it's worth trying. I definitely made use of them in the library monologue that I was using, specifically because of that. They were powerful and worth the chance that they would go. But
yeah, so pretty interesting, sort of the trying to break down the math and some of the statistic stuff. And then we kind of followed that with something similar where we brought on Stephen Van, who, shout out to Stephen for providing our local play group with some cool stuff to hand out. But we covered your power deck size and some of the math behind why you should try and play with a 20 card power deck instead of going over.
Yeah. I'm not sure at what point you guys started listening or something, but the idea behind this sort of episode was like, maybe we can find some sort of evergreen topics or whatever. So
yeah,
I think this one, audio issues aside, probably still kind of holds up. Of like, if you're wondering why you shouldn't just take a enormous deck here, you could even include like, why not go with more than 12 objectives? Because that's now allowed.
You could. Yeah. There's probably plenty of debate to be had with that one.
I don't think Alex ever listened to this one.
And if we did revisit, we'd have no Stephen Van to help us do the math, so probably wouldn't get it right. But
you say you want some math, huh? I know a couple guys.
Yeah, and then after this, we sort of continue with evergreen topics, but this was us starting to prepare for our first Adepticon, and we framed this this episode in how to prepare for tournaments more generically. And we were waiting on the last two Nightvault warbands to drop at this point, so we've got a pretty good sense of where things are settled in Nightvault at this point. So yeah, there was, I'm sure, I don't remember exactly what we talked about, but I'm sure there's a lot of stuff here that probably still holds to today pretty well.
This kind of set up a triumvirate of episodes, or episode 10, 11, and 12 kind of cover pre-Acon and post-Acon.
Yeah.
And we used that to kind of highlight, Phil, you took Magor's. I took Godsworn Hunt. It was my...
a true champion.
Unlike a true champion, I just did barely better than 50-50. I went 2 wins, a draw, and a loss. But
that's pretty impressive given the time.
But I did get my name and stars. There was I remember the Warhammer community article called out the one brave soul who brought Godsworn Hunt.
Yeah.
So that was my early. That was the peak of my career, and then everything downhill from there. But ominously at this point, Phil mentions how excited he is to go back to Adepticon for the Grand Clash. So,
I was so excited.
But you fellas were there for the glorious return. We'll talk about that when we get there. Side note, at this point I was playing with the idea of making every title of an episode a card title. So our one about Godsworn Hunt was Glory or Damnation. Our one about Magor's was Rivers of Blood. But kind of at the same time, Path to Glory, which had started up at this point, was also doing the same thing. And after a while, I was like, I kind of don't want us to both be doing the same thing. So after a few more episodes, I think I end up abandoning that. So
yeah. And not a whole lot to say, but the next episode, like you said, part of this triumvirate, we have our post-Acon wrap, talking about specifically about the deck that I ran with the Magors and sort of how it played out. I don't remember why specifically, other than just that we were covering my deck, maybe because it did better than yours, but I think like we could have easily covered them both, but we just did mine.
Yeah.
But getting past ACON 2019, we bring on Michael Carlin. This might have been our second and maybe first other content creator guest. Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, Stephen Van was doing Call It Shadespire blog.
That's
so this is our
true. He
did
have
second guy who is not in-house. But we really like Michael Carlin, kind of the master of that controller defensive play style. And so we returned to that topic again later. But this is the idea early on. There was this concept that there were just 3 play styles. There was hold objective, aggro, and then control or defensive. Would you say those styles still exist to these days, guys? Or are you... So I mean, Brian chuckles because it feels pretty aggro. I think
they still exist, but are they viable? I'd say only aggro.
And to my thinking, it's everything is much more flex than, you know, in these days of the game that back in these episode 13 days, you would have like Phil was talking about, like you'd have a deck like Aaron took that had no offensive takes. It was all just pushes and holding. So there was more sort of just pure, I'm not doing anything but this one style. Now I feel like every deck has some amount of, well, not every deck, but many decks have some amount of flex to them. Or they did. Gosh, I'm wrapping myself in circles here, but I guess what I'm thinking of is sort of the dire chasm days where flex, everybody had to be thinking about objectives in some way, and we'll see more of the development. But It's interesting to think about how distinct we thought of those play styles and how that has morphed over the course of things.
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, in this episode, we kind of tried to make the argument for needing to have control and defensive playstyles, and that playing defensive isn't a bad thing, because there was, and I would say continues to be, this idea in the community that like, oh, defensive play, that's so against the spirit of the game, and it's so bad when it happens, which I think GW has latched onto or just generally agreed with to begin with, because it continues to get harder and harder to play that way. But I would agree that it makes the game less dynamic because there's not as many ways to play. So I would still stump for control and defensive play having a space in this game, but we will see. We will see. I'm hoping that maybe, Beastbound Assault gives me some hope that maybe they're not completely dedicated to killing control and defensive play. Next up, Live by the Code. We're still following card names here. Yeah. Bring on Jeff, Canadian Jeff.
No, this is California Jeff.
Oh no, this is California Jeff.
City. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, from Clean.
They're practically the same.
No, very different. But rip to you both for not being able to play the game anymore. Claim the City. I actually forgot that we had him on.
More than once.
Yeah.
Which was a recurring thing for me as I went through these. The number of times was like, I totally forgot we did that, or totally forgot that happened.
I have no memory of this place.
Yeah, I've listened to other podcasts where I'm like, how can you guys not remember this? You know, like you just did that like 5 episodes ago, and here I'm like, wow, I would have sworn to you that I never did an episode with so and so, or never covered this. You know, like there's a record to prove me wrong.
We got the Caradron on here, specifically talking shooting, because these guys were the first warband to all have ranged attacks, and at the time that they were like kind of crazy being able to do this. And actually, this is probably worth mentioning, deck restrictions didn't exist yet at this time.
Oh, right.
A pretty important piece of some of this episode, I think, because I think Caradron were the first ones to sort of break the, I'm going to take like 10 surges.
Yeah.
Some interesting time to be playing the game back then. It's these things that you're like, you don't remember that the game ever existed before you had the split, but it's like, oh yeah, there was no restriction on what types of objectives you could take.
Yeah, Phil's talking here. There was no limit on the number of surges, and so you ended up with a lot of decks that were full of surges, and then the only end phases they had were things like did you score 3 objectives this round? Did you score, so like victory after victory? Did you score a total? There was superior tactician have you scored 6 other objectives? Yep. So it would be like just stuff that compounded your surges.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and then we also got some that were introducing things like, do you have X amount of unspent glory? Score more glory. And it was like, yes, of course I do. I've scored 10 surges. Some weird times for anybody who didn't play in Shadespire days. Maybe give Relic a try just to see how it was like. It was weird. It was interesting. You got to do some crazy stuff.
Sort of a companion episode to 14 was 15, Vengeful Revenants. We got Tony Field on there. That was Ilthari's. Show of hands from the newer fellas. Who has ever played with or against Ilthari's?
I have recently played Ilthari's.
Yeah, you play. Did you just play the one where you blew me off the board when I was running Steel Hearts, or did you play more than the once?
Just that one so far, but okay. I want to play more. I really enjoyed the deck actually.
I also recently played against Ilthari's, and in Nemesis, not gonna lie, they've got some play.
What's happening? Oh, is that Paven?
That was Paven.
All right, and then Brian, any experience?
Never.
So between the 3 of you, that is a combined 2 games with or against in all your time.
I played them a couple times.
Oh, okay.
Way back. But
all right.
Yeah.
I mean,
recently,
when we recorded this episode, Ilthari's were strong.
Yeah, I can't remember if they won a clash or were just up in the finals, but they had a couple clashes in a row where they were in the mix, and it was that stage where you're like, wow, Ilthari starts on 2 dodge. Like, can you believe a fighter starting on 2 defensive dice? Like, what's going on? So it, and then even more so, Galligan starting on 2 block was, yeah, that's still impressive.
He is really tough to shift even today.
Yeah.
Next episode, we cover reactions. So this is sort of talking about all the different types of reaction. I don't think, did we actually cover every reaction?
I think I listed them all out. I don't know if we covered every card that had a reaction, but this is still at the stage where I would like write, okay, for episode prep, I'm going to write every single card that says reaction on it down, and then we'll use that to work with.
Wait, reactions were not a thing from the beginning?
No, they were.
They existed. They were just, I don't know. Like the rules around reactions were not as well defined. To be sure, we definitely didn't have. A thing. Definitely didn't have all the defined windows. There was a lot of weird questions about, when can you actually play this? Some interesting stuff. Another episode where it's like, hey, we're trying to cover a more evergreen topic, probably something we could even revisit. That's pretty cool. But we pretty significant release that was coming up with this episode, Power Unleashed.
Yeah, so this was the first time that I think I called it Power Unlimited Power was the episode title for this, and then Power Unleashed or Power Unbound.
Maybe
Power
it was Unbound.
Yeah, Power Unbound. It was the second card only release they'd done. They'd done a leaders one back in season 1.
Yeah,
guys, I don't know if you ever looked at like the leaders cards. They're really bad. There's like I don't even remember how many cards were in that particular release. There was one good ping for Far Striders.
Yeah.
And there might have been like one other. There was like 2 cards in that whole pile that were like worth playing, and most of them are faction restricted.
I think there was like a power card and an objective for every faction that was out at the time in that.
I think
pack.
so. Yeah, I think there might have even been 3 total, like power, like gambit or spell, and upgrade, and then an objective. Because I know I've slotted those all into the boxes of like what I keep the old warbands in, as if they were a part of those warbands.
Yeah, difficult to I don't know, to sort out like what they were it was definitely a stage where they were still figuring out like, hey, what does it mean to do like these cards? I mean, there was stuff like, I don't know. I think there was the Reavers. I was like, oh, cool. There's another objective. It was a 3 glory end phase, and it's like if the only surviving fighters, at least 2 are leaders. So you'd have to like engineer this insane board state where everyone was dead except for Garrick and the enemy leader. Like,
yeah. The stage is set.
Yeah.
Quite the card. I bet no one's ever scored it.
Yeah.
I just pulled it up on DB. There were 60 cards in that pack.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's a lot of cards.
Pretty bad.
Then we were coming up on our first time of as a podcast of seeing a box set rotation. We called it Nightfall's Beast Rises, which was, we knew Beastgrave was coming, and so we knew that we were going to change realms. But there was no setup for rotation or anything like that. We didn't know exactly what that meant. Like, what does it mean? We knew we can't just have like an infinite pool of cards. So are they going to rotate? Like, how's this all going to work? So we got Jeff Osborne on, and that's your Canadian Jeff.
Yeah.
So.
Did you guys have any thoughts, or do you remember any thoughts about shifting realms? Like, was that something that caused a lot of discussion?
Yeah, I was excited about it. We'd spent, I mean, the art, everything about the game was so cohesive around, specifically around Shadespire, because Night Vault was something unlocked kind of deeper in the city of Shadespire. So we'd been in this, you kind of say Shyish, but it's really sort of a little pocket realm somewhere in the gloaming, but ported from there. But the idea of like, what are they going to do? Like this is such a cohesive, like artistic whole that I don't know how you change this up. So
yeah,
it was kind of an exciting time. We just didn't know where it was going to go. The game felt really healthy, and just it's always the big question marks on there.
Yeah, power level was still pretty high. There was lots of viable options to play at the time.
A whole 16 warbands. Can you imagine that many warbands?
So many. It's pretty crazy. And I do remember thinking, at least, maybe because we were part of this larger Age of Sigmar sort of group that cared about narrative, but it's like, oh, it's cool that we're going to a different realm. What, where else will we end up going? What warbands would exist in Gur? And so, I mean, there was certainly some cool narrative stuff there. I agree, though, with Davey. It was sort of this very unknown. We were entering a new world where we didn't know what to expect, which is also, I mean, it can be good, it can be bad, but I think at the time it was mostly good. We have a quick note here about the ATC Grand Battle that happened around the same time. I don't know if there's a whole lot to say.
I just got pulled into the Path to Glory fellas and ended up playing Tomes Molag there and did well. We took that one down. So
yeah,
that was a cool event. Kind of sparked a love for team events, and we've been talking locally about maybe trying to make one of our Madtown Throwdowns a team event coming up, just to give people a taste of that. So.
Well, now that you said it,
I would love that so much.
It is logistically more difficult, but I think we just commit to it. I think we just do it. So.
Yeah, you do need more people.
Yeah,
but I think we could probably make it something happen.
Alliance tournament is absolutely on my Underworlds bucket list.
All right, we'll see what we can do. We occasionally return this next idea. This is rules of thumb. We brought Eric Oakland. Eric played the game a little bit early on and then kind of wandered elsewhere. At the time, he was still kind of experimenting a little bit, but was much less experienced. So we occasionally try to do these episodes that are like, hey, we can get super in the weeds with like, here's an entire episode about reactions. So every so often we'll kind of pull out and say, hey, let's try an episode that is kind of some more broad advice. And that's what this was. Like, here's some general rules of thumb. And this was stuff like, if you have an offensive upgrade, don't play it onto a fighter right before your opponent's taking a turn because you're really just tipping your hand. You know, that sort of thing. Like things that if you're real new to the game, you might not have sorted out. And that was fun. I did have a little note on here at the time early in the discussion. Phil's like, I'm kind of thinking about chosen axes. And I was like, wow, I don't ever remember that happening.
I kind of remember thinking about liking their like style, but I think that's about as far as I got because I started building decks, and then
it's always the way.
And I don't know, there was a lot of stuff happening at this time. We were getting into Nightfall or ending Nightfall, I guess. We're getting into Beastgrave, and so there's a lot of changes happening, and so took my focus away. Speaking of other just sort of old discussions, we continued our next topic with Fear the Fiends, and we did a Magor's Fiends deep dive with Matt Martin from Crit Def, which Crit Def is not going any longer.
Yeah, they've not in the mix anymore.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I can like see you typing this note in real time. For some reason, we did this Magor. Oh yeah, Warhammer Underworlds Online was about to come out, and they decided to release the first two warbands for that game to be Magor's Fiends and Steelhearts. So we revisited them as a sort of as a refresher before the game came out. We had a banned and restricted update at this time. I couldn't tell you what was on it or what really changed with it. But again, significant thing to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of make note of it because every time I think you guys, well, not every time, but most times that a banned and restricted or Forsaken restricted comes in, it's like a really community worthy thing. It's not quite the same as getting an influx of cards, but it is a big shakeup to the meta.
Yeah, so most decks have to change after these come out, especially back then when I think they were hitting more cards. It was maybe a little more scattershot, if I remember correctly. There was sort of like, where'd this come from? But
Skylar, remind me, you said there was one that like hit 16 of your cards or something like that. What?
Yeah, I was looking at
what faction was that?
It was the Scase Wild Hunt.
Wow.
And it was the June 2020 Beastgrave FAR update. So at this point in time,
hit the speed pack.
So notably they hit at this time Trophy Belt, Survival Instincts, Blazing Soul, Restless Prize, Frenzied Search.
God.
So this was the deck that I had planned to take to Adepticon 2020 was a Scase deck with so many of what I just mentioned. And I remember my restricted inclusions went from 3 to 10 or 11. So they hit 7 or 8 additional cards.
Yeah. And then you're no longer in the like, well, I'll just swap this guy. You're like, I need to tear it down and start again.
Yeah. And at the point, that was a double blow because one, I didn't get to take this deck to Adepticon, and then two, the deck was decimated, by a FAR update.
There's nothing I can play here anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Folks, with the mention of Blazing Soul here, there was a time not just when Mollog was out and about, but Mollog was out and about and could cheat his Inspire.
Yeah. That I guess we didn't really mention it too much beyond the name, but Power Unbound, man, what a card set. There was some ridiculous stuff in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the early part of Beastgrave had a very high power level.
Are you saying deck Power Unbound lived up to its name?
It certainly did. It was not. I thought it was just going to be like, it's some magic stuff. So they're like playing off of that. No. It was.
Well, and our reference point was that really atrocious leaders pack before. So,
we're just like, another card pack. And they just bent the whole game in half. Like, no, here we go. But I don't know. I remember some of those games as being really fun though, because it wasn't like one outlier warband being super strong. You could, everybody was doing busted stuff. So interesting times. We're about to hit Dreadfane though. And Dreadvane, certainly an interesting concept. We actually played out of the box Dreadvane one time when it first came out. That was, I don't remember a lot about it except for the the environment cards. I thought those were pretty cool. I thought that could have been like a concept that they ported into the full game if they wanted to, but
do you guys know what he's talking about with these environment cards? I guess you do, because we saw them in Arena Mortis, right?
I was going to ask if they were like Arena Mortis.
Yeah, basically.
It's that concept. It definitely directly ported into that. So I guess for folks who weren't around when Dreadfane came out, Dreadfane was a board game version of the later Heroes, Mournflight, and Condemners. And it was a single board. So it was like two halves of a board, but just as one big board. So you had no control of how it was set up. And then
objectives are already marked on the board.
Yep. So there's no setup. And along with playing a game normally, you also had these environment cards that would flip out every round and just do something cool. It was like weird traps and stuff. So
it was a weird release because it went out in like Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, they were trying out this idea of like, hey, we're gonna try introducing some of these box games into the sort of big box store market to try and pull people in. Whether that worked or not, I don't know. I would guess it didn't. We haven't seen it much since then. But
I was about to say, how many more endeavors into Barnes and Nobles have you made since then?
Yeah, well,
GW keeps putting out little ones, coffee table type games.
Yeah.
I see people pick them up every once in a while. Like, I know a guy who he doesn't get out much, so he'll just pick some of those up with to play with him and his wife or a buddy that comes over. So
yeah,
they're out there.
Just not the Underworld stuff, but yeah, they continue to try and live in that space for sure. But I thought it was kind of a cool release. I like that they were like expanding mechanics. I always like to see new ideas get added into a game.
Yeah. We brought Dean Bills on. Dean was the winner of that 2019 Grand Clash, took down Amon in the finals with his Thorns. And it was at a time where hold objective playstyle was kind of poo-pooed a little bit. It was pretty impressive that he had done that. We brought him on just to take a look at this idea of rotation had finally been announced, and we're like, okay, what does this mean? Like, what how do you rebuild your decks? And we actually talk about that several times if you needed a hint about how big a deal that was. But the bigger deal then was right after episode 23, Beastgrave arrives. We had Jeff Moore on. That's Claim the City Jeff. He was very excited about this. And this is when you guys came into the game. You guys... Was it right as the Beastgrave box dropped, or what was the deal for you three?
It was Christmas that year,
okay.
And a gift exchange amongst the three of us unknowingly brought us all into the game.
Excellent.
The first,
I'm not apologizing.
The first product was a gift from Josh to Brian, and that was the Gits. And he bought it because he knew it was going to be the most outside of what Brian would buy for himself purchase. The warband, he could have given him. And before he bought it for him, he checked in with me and was like, if I get this for Brian, like, do you think this is a game that we'll play? And I think Brian and I had been talking about it on the side, and he was like, it's got hexes, Skylar. Like, let's get you into it.
I'd been trying to get him into 40K and in Warhammer in some form, and I was just like, yeah, this Underworlds game, like, I had a really bad demo of Shadespire that really tainted me for the longest time. And then I was just like, this thing's been staring me right in the face, and are you into hexes?
Yep. So after Brian got that gift, I think it was like the next day, he showed up at my house with the Beastgrave box and gifted that to me.
Yeah, this was a momentous release for all number of reasons. The setting changing, having that new color palette, even just things that are like not mechanics specific like that felt big. There were tons of mechanics that were important, like lethal hexes were all of a sudden getting placed. Like, man, for a long time, the board was a very, very dangerous place to be.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is where the guard mechanic came in to make you not be able to be driven back. But have you guys ever known
that's true.
guard to not prevent drive back?
When I learned the game, guard, held you still.
Okay. Yeah, so it did not do that in Shadespire and Night Vault, which meant that very rarely did anyone ever do it. Usually it had some sort of objective reason to do it. There was a surge called Change of Tactics and something called Keep Them Guessing and stuff like that. That would give you reasons to do it, but it was pretty inefficient action to do back then. So it's funny to think of, that's the only way I ever think about it now, but it wasn't like that for a couple years in the game. And I like that they can use these seasons to kind of tweak, like, hey, let's try something else out. We'll see that later with some of the other season releases. That's
the rule, that like hearing about it later, right? Getting to the game at Beastgrave, learning it Beastgrave forward, and then eventually hearing somebody say, guard didn't used to work that way. I was like, what?
Yeah. And as we'll see, kind of the Beastgrave season heralded the return of hold objective play as being extraordinarily powerful, primarily on the backs of a couple of warbands, but in general, kind of a big deal. And all the way up through until relatively recently, there was some reason for objectives to be pretty important to a lot of people. And to that extent, we had Dean Bills back on for talking about hold objective playstyle. This is actually also at the time where we had some kind of goofiness with our recording schedule, where I think there was at one point we had like 3 episodes recorded and a couple just banked so that we could we'd play them out as they came. It did mean, I think we learned from that experience, like then you kind of end up releasing content like maybe this hold objective playstyle one we recorded with Dean before Beastgrave actually arrived, and so then we're releasing episodes like, hey, here's an episode that is kind of obsolete already. So a little left a little bit of a sour taste in our mouth, and we backed off of that.
Yeah. And then something completely different.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting episode. I have actually not listened to it. But we got to interview the design team, or I guess development team, for the Underworlds online game, which it was really interesting at the time because it was, we just got Beastgrave, we have all this change in the game, and then it's like, hey, there's this online version of this, but it's pretty much just Shadespire and like not even all the warbands yet. So like, we were really trying to pick their brains about what does this look like? Is it going to try and catch up with the board game version? And I remember this one going kind of rough, but it ended up being like a fun thing to do. But I in retrospect, it's kind of like, I don't know that we really had a good idea of what we wanted to get out of this.
Yeah, we were kind of surprised. We asked to be able to do it, thinking it wouldn't happen, and then it did. And I don't think we were.
Yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, cool. Just sort of why this is just slapped in here as well, because it's like not really coherent with what else was going on in our release cycle. But
yeah, I know I bought into the Underworlds Online to give it a try, and it was interesting because they didn't just copy the Shadespire release meta, and I think that was smart because it created its own meta in terms of releases, but they ended up, after several warbands in the initial game purchase, the core game, you then buy warbands on a individual upgrade, warband pack basis, and I wasn't willing to buy physical and digital warbands as they were released because it was 2 different metas.
Yeah, and there was a lot of stuff that I remember seeing of people being like, hey, we already lived through this meta, it's solved. I know what to play if I want to like beat the people who are just trying this out on Steam because they're like, oh, this looks cool. So it's still around. They're still making updates to it. I have not checked in a while, but I think they just put out an update just last week. So, I mean, if you like playing online and want to support them, go check it out. It's still there. I think the price has come down a little bit.
Cool. After talking about Underworlds Online, we had Aman on for the first and probably I think only time, where we just, and this is more with that kind of huge shakeup with Beastgrave arriving. At the time, Rippa's had just dropped. Rippa's and Grimwatch were kind of pseudo partners with this. I know they were the first pair of warbands to get released separately. As onesies, and that was like a shipping issue. What I don't remember is which order that happened in.
I think Grimwatch came later. I want to say.
But those are two factions that are really kind of persistent. Like they do these different things in such a way that they've been in the conversation ever since. They've had stronger and weaker times, but they do what they do so distinctly and so differently that they're always interesting for that.
Absolutely.
We already talked about Tomes, episode 27. We brought both Benny and Adam on. This was atrocious to edit because I think Benny's audio died like part of the way through, and we'd already tried multiple times. It was really rough, and it was one of the things that you notice some of the guest spots start tailing off just because coordinating, scheduling, and then hoping that the recording setup is good for a person is kind of a lot to ask. So
there were some pretty rough audio quality episodes where there was just not a good way. I mean, some of them we powered through, and maybe we shouldn't have, I guess, is a good way to say it. Yeah. But we titled this one Book Club. We were just chatting because I think they had both brought Tomes builds to the same GT, Cursebreakers and Eyes of the Nine, respectively. So continuing to see Tomes have a fairly large impact on the game, and while continuing to do that type of like stack upgrades to get some benefit has often been kind of broken, and because it's not balanced properly. I do like it as a concept, and I hope that they try to revisit it again a little bit every season. I think we've seen something every time we get like there's you could become the beast or whatever in Beastgrave. I don't remember what the thing was called.
Avatar.
The Avatar,
the Urgrub, yeah.
And then
that was fun.
That was fun. I missed that. That one wasn't all that ridiculous either.
No.
And then there's maps. I don't think I've ever seen anybody play maps. But I like the concept, so I hope they keep doing it.
Well, you might see somebody play maps if Leaks Bowl gets his way.
That would be something. Where'd we go from here, Davey?
We had our 1 year anniversary, and we had Jeff come on and just kind of a fun recap ep. He actually quizzed us on our own podcast, which I don't. We did okay on that quiz.
Yeah,
but it was kind of a fun moment.
Probably do significantly worse now than I did then.
Oh, so much worse. We talked about it, I think, offline, but there's so many episodes where I was like, I don't remember ever doing this episode. But, and then the next one was something kind of near and dear to our heart, Mad Scientists at Work. We got Mad Skulls, and I think most, if not all of us here, of the five of us, have some kind of a sweet spot for like that, going off into a corner and finding some crazy build that no one's ever thought of, or experimenting with some ideas.
Absolutely.
So much so.
Yeah.
It's totally not going to be the topic of an episode coming up, but not in the least.
No.
Yeah. In a move that will forever burn Skylar's brain, I released a half episode 29.5, and it kind of throws the count off because most podcast things try to count the episodes for you. And so from there on, most of our episodes actually have like confusing episode numbering. I thought I had it fixed, and then I was just looking at it's still a problem. But
that one will always hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah, I've got this memo right here. Davey, you are a monster.
Well, that's because I didn't want to give full episode credit to what was just a very short one. We had a contest drawing, and I should have just folded it into an actual episode.
Was it actually under 30 minutes?
This one was. This is the only episode that's ever under 30. I think it's like a 5-minute episode. But this was, we ran a contest, which was look at all the season 1 and 2 cards and say who you thought was the most frequently pictured fighter in all those cards. I physically went through and counted every fighter in all those cards. And it turned out first place was a tie between Magor and Oberyn the Bold. But we did a little giveaway. It's always something I've kind of thought the spirit of that kind of lives on in the flavor text quiz, which arrived much later. But
I'm willing to bet Malaga is still a strong contender in that.
It's got to be, right? He may have overtaken Oberyn. I'm not going through that again. There's so many more cards.
Oh yeah, man. It's pretty rough. There's also so many more warbands. Having to track all the fighters from 47 warbands or whatever.
Yeah. Episode 30, we got who do we get on for that?
Yeah, we get Max Bernstein for the first time. Man, so there's some energy here. Max is always fun. It's too bad that those guys are not still recording, but honestly, I don't actually remember what exactly we discussed on this episode.
It's very similar to the rules of thumb. It was just kind of general things. The Battle for Salvation did a Keys to Salvation, which was always kind of fun. Whoever they had on as guest would give like, here's a tip for playing. And we said, what if we did a whole episode that was just tips for playing?
Got it. Yeah. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but when we got to our recommended listening, he really set you up with like 6 or 7 songs.
I think it was more than that. It was like 12. It was crazy. I was like, this is not how it's intended to function. That whole recommended listening thing, that's comes from the Point Hammered guys, where Johnny was just really into his music, and I really enjoyed having that. So I shamelessly stole it from them, and then put it in early on when I didn't understand copyright law. I would put our outro music to those.
Yeah. And we made some mistakes with that.
So I had to go back and edit those out. So yeah.
It was fun while it lasted. For those who don't know, it is, I think, mentioned on the postings for each ep, but there's a Spotify playlist of all these songs. If you ever just want to listen to a really crazy mix of
that flows together in no possible way at all, because it's so genre all over the place.
Not at all, but it's fun. So feel free to go check that out. And then we have yet another half episode, but this one is a fun one. Unfortunately, I was not able to join for this most recent rendition, but we did the Mortal Realms Podcast Network crossover spectacular in Aaron's basement, and that was a super fun colliding of worlds. We've just brought all the podcasts and all the people together and talked all things Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, as the network has grown with a number of hosts and shows, we're actually going to try to repeat that again here at Adepticon. Maybe not necessarily an episode, but get everybody together. So everybody in the extended Mortal Realms family has met each other at least the once, maybe. So
should be a good time. We're on to episode 31 with Risky Business. We do not have a guest for this one. This is another one of those topics where we're trying to do sort of like, hey, how can you approach the game? Some tips for playing. And in this one, as like, what's your risk reward assessment when you're playing the game, and how do you make those hard decisions? So something that absolutely still applies today. You have to know, like, what are the odds of anything working out for you, and when do you need to like really just swing for the fences and bet the farm, because if it doesn't work, you'd lose, and if it does work, you win. Is sort of those types of moments in games, and you have to know when it's right to take those risks.
There's kind of a significant moment off camera here. Skylar, you want to take this one?
Sure. So between episodes 31 and 32 is the tournament that I've alluded to, where we met Phil and Davey for the first time. This is we had those Christmas gifts together. We were playing the game and loving it, and I sought to find if there was any local scene for it. And sure enough, Phil had posted up a Noble Knight tournament, which is where we play now. For our weekly get together every Thursday, and is where we originally met these two.
Mm-hmm. I kind of ran that and ran Iron Jaw's Rivals deck as supplemented by the Leaders Pack, and I think I had to find one Universal to make it legal. It was not a particularly functional deck, but it was fun.
Do you all remember what you ran at this? I know I ran Skaith, no surprise.
Yeah.
I think Brian couldn't make it, so actually I think he comes into the picture later.
I had to work.
I'll give you 3 guesses what I brought to the table, and it definitely wasn't Eyes of the Nine.
It was Curse Breakers, wasn't it?
It was Eyes of the Nine. I remember losing every single game except my game against Davey, and until today, I did not know that was a Rivals deck.
Oh no!
My confidence has been a sham.
I don't actually remember. I want to say that I was playing Curse Breakers, but I could be wrong about that. I do remember that I ended up playing Cameron with his ghosts, and that was rough. And speaking of Cameron, we got him on for our next episode, and we were chatting the Banshees. What did we run down with Cam?
It was mostly because we hadn't taken it was like a faction deep dive with Mournflight. It was something that they were big in the meta. There was some disconnect where for some reason they were bigger in the US than the UK at the time. I remember John Wynn Reese saying like he's like, I think they're really good. No one else does. I was like, what are you talking about? Like they're like everybody, but I think it was an Atlantic Ocean disconnect there. So we'd been trying to make something like this happen. We actually ended up with a episode 32.5 because Max Bernstein so wanted to be on this episode he like once we just grabbed a local guy because the recording schedule didn't work out. He was like, okay, but when are we doing the one with me? And I was like, I guess this weekend. So he got on for a second opinion, which is kind of a interesting way to do it.
I always wondered how that came to be. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Oh man, he really wanted. I even joke about it in the intro to that. I'm like, well, Max really wanted to talk about Mournflight, and he has no other outlet to share his opinion on.
Doesn't have his own show or anything.
Not like he's got his own show where he could talk about him, but here we are.
That's awesome.
But it was fun. It was a weird 1-2. We're gonna cover this, and then we're gonna cover it right away again. But
yeah.
I'm pretty sure this is when I started listening to the podcast as well, which makes a lot of sense, right? You guys probably brought it up at the tournament, and I think so either the 32nd episode with Cameron was my first, or I snuck in and caught 31. But 32 is burned into my memory because I remember Cameron talking about the ghosts.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, next up we finally discussed Grimwatch, which is kind of crazy that it took us this long to talk about Grimwatch. We get Sandro on, who had recently won a clash. And I guess this goes back to our previous point of watching the meta and who was winning grand clashes.
Yeah.
But I think this was just the start of realizing how crazy Grimwatch were. Yeah. And the reign of terror would begin. The dead will rule the world for the next I don't know until the meta shifts with Diregasm probably.
Yeah, for a while. I will say another reason for us to be slow to cover Grimwatch is there's sometimes when a new release comes out we're going to try and cover it, but if there's a thing where every other content creator out there is kind of talking about a thing, we kind of don't need to. We're like, let's cover something else. If people want to hear about that, there's plenty for them to hear out there.
Absolutely.
And so we've had a tendency to maybe try to find something that not everybody else is covering, or cover it in a way that not everybody else is covering. Because if everybody was all the time just episode after episode analyzing the meta, it'd be kind of a little monotone.
Yeah. Well, and then it starts to become who's really got that much more to say? It's probably all been said before.
Yeah.
Speaking of talking about new releases, episode 34, we continue talking about new warbands, and we talked about just the universals from the new releases of Mantrappers and Wormspat. If I remember correctly, the reason we did this is just because the universals applied more generically, how they fit into the meta, and we had not yet really evaluated the two new warbands a whole lot. And then also to that point that you mentioned where other people are running down the warbands, so we don't necessarily have to do that. Had Jeff Osborne on for this one as well.
Yeah, along those lines of trying to cover what people are not covering, everyone was very excited about, I say everyone, the big splash on the Wormspat and Hrothgorn release was Hrothgorn.
Very much so.
Mostly because of their power cards, people were not very hot on Wormspat, which is understandable. There was one voice in all that was John Wynn Reese, who was saying, I think they're better than everyone's first impression. So we had him on to talk that. I'll be honest, I didn't come away all that convinced in that. It's not that they're bad. I think at the time they didn't have the universal support that they need. They're one of those war bands every so often you'll see them pop up like Alex with Illusions or some such. So
yeah, if I remember correctly,
is that too soon, Brian? Or
we definitely created that monster.
I don't want to talk about it.
But if I remember correctly, John was trying to say how Wormspat were going to be so good at hold objectives with three fighters.
They've got in-faction supremacy, and he was saying it's better than people give it credit for. And
maybe, but not by much.
We'd only seen the glimpse of Morgok coming down the line. Here's a rough one. This next one, Read the Room. We're talking about reading the meta, and again, we're getting ready for Adepticon 2020. RIP.
Yeah. Oh, it hurts. It hurts.
I think we specifically reference our guest today is the looming specter of COVID-19, which, that did not age well. So.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have spoken that into the universe.
But it's that cycle of prepping or covering grand clashes, which is about to be broken for a couple years.
We're about to hit a pretty rough stretch, but not quite yet. We do have a couple more small episodes that we started to sort of fill space. I think the idea was like, we'll power through for now. So we have this quick coverage, Warhammer Underworlds Online releases. I think actually
what it's been like to play on.
Yeah. So we have I think we got some pre-release Steam keys. So me and Aaron checked it out, and I don't know if we ever were able to actually play each other because the matchmaking system wasn't working right. But regardless, we got to go in, check it out, actually play it. It was fun to just sort of see some of the stuff happen, but it didn't feel the same to me anyway. But yeah, so pretty quick there, and then bring Matt Martin back on to talk more Khorne, which is kind of funny looking back through these, how many episodes we have talking about the Khorne warbands. I think there's a soft spot here.
Actually, it's honestly a little embarrassing how many times we cover the same warbands.
Yeah, a little bit. But, I guess you just make art about what you know. But this is the last episode before some dark times.
Yeah.
We go. So I don't know if there's anything you want to mention about this, but we go radio silent here for about 4 months.
Yeah. So this was 39, 40, 41. Basically Phil holds things together for 39 and 40, covering the two warbands that released during the early days of COVID. With to have it over to do again, I don't know that we would have released any more frequently, but I would have at least. I do feel this is kind of my biggest regret with the podcast is not releasing a statement here like, hey, we're not dead, we're on hiatus. We're sorting it out. I just, with my job being what it was, there wasn't any way to kind of that and having younger children. it was kind of all hands on deck for a while there while we were sorting out what all that meant. But ironically, like it was almost immediately before this that we actually started receiving some preview content. And so it's possible that we would, I think you released those 2 episodes out of, a feeling of obligation, like, well, we got this free stuff, which probably
we should cover this
stuff. Probably cover it. And I even wrote to him, I'm like, hey, I don't know if or when we'll ever record again. So you can turn the tap off. Cause I don't want, I don't want to feel like I'm taking advantage of this. And they said, well, would you still play with it? And we're like, oh, absolutely. And they're like, well, we'll keep it coming for now. And if you maybe you'll come back around. And we did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So during this hiatus is when that FAR I mentioned hits as well. And just wanted to bring it back up because it was actually the first FAR to introduce Warband specific cards as well.
Yeah. Some Grimwatch required changes there, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the first warbands ever hit by warband specific restrictions was Grimwatch, Wrathgorn's Man Trappers, Lady Harrow's Mournflight, Stormsire's Cursebreakers, and Thorns of the Briar Queen.
Yeah. And some of those still persist.
All the hits.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Back in the day, but yeah. So for anyone who had to struggle through a solo recording of those 2 episodes, I do apologize, but I was doing my best with nobody to soundboard off of, so I was just trying to cover something. In retrospect, maybe a blog post would have made more sense, but we had not yet really figured that out, so there was nothing to like work off of. So I was like, I'll do what I know, and I'll just record some stuff.
Yeah.
So in total, this span covered about 9 months where we were not releasing consistent content. But we have Davy's glorious return. What did we cover for that episode, sir?
So kind of a good time to return in general, but for anyone was the Dire Chasm drop. And this, I know Brian and I were both excited to see a Slaanesh warband come into the mix here. And then we have some filthy elf players here as well.
You know who you are.
So Miari's and the Dread Pageant. And continuing that theme of we're going more into the realm that we already were in. So we didn't leave the Mountain of Beastgrave. We just went deeper into it, into the Dire Chasm.
Yeah.
So the pandemic took a lot of wind out of my sails at this time, or up until this time. And Brian picked up the Dire Chasm box before I did and had me over to try the out of the box warbands. And I had a blast playing against him, and it revitalized my energy for the game and brought me back into playing regularly despite the pandemic, persisting for much longer.
I really do feel like the Dire Chasm box was just a really nicely balanced core set that we don't always get. Sometimes we have something where out of the box one is substantially favored over the other. So
looking at you, Gnarlwood.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I'm looking at Shadespire, the
OG, where it's like, this is how you should learn the game, and it's like, oh god. But we didn't know any better. This is actually also the first time that we got a full release schedule from Games Workshop. We didn't know what the warbands were exactly, but we got like, here's the next, I don't really remember how long it was.
Yeah, roadmap, right?
It was a while, but they were like, you're going to have releases coming fast. Like, you're going to have a whole bunch of stuff.
That was really good after the pandemic, like having a clear vision. I'm sure that had to be a breath of fresh air. I know I definitely had to hit Skylar and Josh with the AD and get them back into the game. I was just like, clear. Like, I finally got a Slaanesh warband. You're playing with me.
Shared pain.
Yeah. Yep. Dire Chasm brought us primacy and really doubled down on the hunter quarry mechanics that we had seen.
Yeah, sure did.
And that was an interesting time. Primacy, a controversial mechanic, but really,
I still love it.
I mean, it really helped shape that season and give it its flavor. It was quite a moment when that eventually rotated out.
Yeah.
So
we moved on immediately, covering new warbands. We had Kagra's Ravagers come out, and sort of a weird warband to cover. Kind of ended up feeling, I think, a little bit like this is disjointed or something. I remember feeling like it was an odd release, but it was cool to see Chaos Undivided again. And at this point, we've already made note that we know Seraphon's coming, so I had nothing else on my mind. We were waiting on Lizards.
Yeah, Kagra's felt like the right warband at the wrong time there, where they were.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot else to cover there. I mean, we weren't even playing very much at this time. I think we just started doing some get-togethers with Aaron again on his back porch, so we were able to sort of have a relatively safe play space. And I do remember playing against Ravagers with Pavend shortly after this. So that was interesting to see them in action. We actually continue covering Kagra's. We break down the universals that came in that box as the next episode. Not a whole lot there, but we do know that Mad Mob is coming at that point. We have a preview for them already. Like I mentioned just a little bit ago, releases are coming really fast. We were having to cover stuff, almost all new releases for the next few episodes.
I would feel remiss to not highlight at this time that, and ever since Kagra's Ravagers entered the scene, they've never left our local meta. Shout out to you, Alex.
Good job for taking like the thing that everybody said was complete garbage and just owning them and making them your own.
I mean, that's Alex's MO.
Absolutely. That's what he's.
It could apply to a warband. It could apply to a particular card.
And he's made him work. So kudos.
I don't know how many times you had to beat the Kagras out of him, and he still hasn't.
Well, some people love things into existence, and some people love things to death. Not naming any names.
Yeah, out of sheer will, I feel like he's finally, gotten the the power level he's always wanted for them. Even if there was a period where he couldn't beat my soul raid and would literally ask to try again and again.
Hey, that kind of dedication is how you become a master at a warband. Ask anybody who is stuck with chosen axes all this time. They will tell you they're not bad. You just have to be good. On to our next episode, though. We have yet another new release. What were we covering with this one, Davey?
Oh, you know what we were covering. Episode 44 and 45 were the Starblood and their universals, and Phil's Forever Warband finally arrived for him.
The game could have ended here. Although I'm hopeful for another Seraphon Warband now because of all this stuff in AOS. But yes,
oh my.
Got the lizards.
I feel like that's got to happen. Yeah.
And it's been great. I think we referenced it a little earlier. The speed package was still in play.
Oh no, sorry. This is a reference to the speed puzzle. This is another along the lines where I said with the cards existing in the game, what is the farthest a fighter can move in a single activation?
Yes, and I think we maybe even didn't know the answer ourselves, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, to go figure it out. It ended up being, I wish I could remember exactly. It ended up being either Skaven, either a Spike Claw fighter or a Mournflight fighter.
Yeah,
and the number was something up along lines like 28 hexes of movement if you had all the.
Because
I believe it was Mournflight.
Yeah,
it's one of the warbands that has the double your speed ploy. But
yeah, I think I figured out if you had two boards set like full width attached to each other that your fighter could do a full lap of the board.
You should like get 10 glory for doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, some cool episodes. I mean, not that it matters. The speed package was still around because I remember that being one of the first things that I built with Starbloods. It's like, oh, they're all speed 4 and go up to speed 5. Let's go fast and earn glory, and it still worked for a while there. Next up, we're again talking new stuff. We got the Essentials pack. The Crimson Court were on pre-order at this point. Along with starter set. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we saw the, oh man, blanking on the name, crossbow guys and Reapers.
Storm of Celestis and Drippers, Wraith Reapers. Yeah, this was interesting. So the Essentials pack was kind of a big deal here. It was access to cards that basically would always be around, and it made it so that you did not have to keep seeing Great Strength reprinted in every single set. So Dire Chasm was the first big box release that we saw that didn't have Hold Objective 1, Hold Objective 2, 3, 4, 5, Great Strength, Great Speed, Great Fortitude, all in that.
Supremacy.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes those big box releases a little more exciting because you're like, well, I don't already know before I even open it. Before it's like, I know 50% of the cards that are in there already, or the universals,
and own them 3 times over. Yeah.
And Skylar and you guys kind of kept the stock price high on the Essentials pack. So with this is we'll actually hit this in a little bit here, but Skylar, is one of your strategies for getting people into the game, right?
Yeah, you showed up and learned the game with us, and showed up again. We threw an Essentials pack at you.
It was a pretty good deal, really, because there's a lot of strong cards in there, and these were not always easy to find. These card packs are sometimes they just kind of don't get stocked enough. So, cool thing to have, cool thing to be able to do for our community.
One weird side effect of this starter set, the coming out with, was that it basically brought 2 board/4 board sides into like perpetual relevance. So there are now 4 board sides that never rotate. So that has meant from there forward, we've had more boards in play really than almost at any other time. It feels like. We haven't really talked about Arena Mortis has kind of been in and out, so that has had boards coming in. But I do feel like since that time, I've really carried a lot of boards around with me. I mean, you already did before that, but
the total available pool is very large right now, and will probably always be that way unless they decide to say starter pack is getting out of here. But
I mean, with these 6-month seasons as well, that's going to keep that board count very high.
Yeah, it's always going to be high, which is, I mean, it's good to have the flexibility there, but it gets to be a lot of stuff when you want to bring everything with you.
Yeah. We're pretty much like all in on new releases coming here. So moving forward, it's like episode 47 is Crimson Court Universals. Episode 48 is Headcracka. One of my favorite titles, What's Headcrackalackin'? But 49, we brought in Benji from Tabletop Sydney to talk his Crimson Court play experience. Episode 50, we talked Silent Menace. I'm going to detour onto that in just a second. But then 51 was also Universals from Mad Mob and Kanan, which had come out. We could not keep up with the.
No, it was insane.
I was listening to the first few minutes of each of these episodes to get familiar, and like again and again, we're like, it's all we can do to keep up. And that was in such stark contrast to the previous months where the releases during the early parts of COVID were so spread out. We had nothing for such a long time, and then all of a sudden we had so much.
Yeah.
We talk often about how we like it when things are in flux in this game, and this was a case of getting like too much. There was no time for anything to settle out before something new was landing on top of it. But I did want to take a second and mention episode 50 that this episode was Silent Menace to Society, and that's Zach or Requisite on with that. And we're talking about the Silent Menace, the first Universal Rivals deck. Do you guys remember this coming out and what your thoughts were on? Like I remember, for me, I remember being like, I like the idea that there is a Rivals deck, like a standalone. They weren't even calling it at that time. They were calling it like a cohesive deck that you could just unbox and play.
I just remember the Silent Relics, and adopting to many of them.
Yeah. I don't think it made too many waves as far as the concept of a Universal Rivals deck goes. But like Skylar said, I do remember that there were several relics in that one that were just like, oh, okay, that's something to look out for in Championship.
Yeah.
The deck as a cohesive unit that you could play out of the box was somewhat laughable. Like you read through the cards and you're like, all the strikes, and you're just like, what? How are you ever supposed to do this? And so the deck was going in so many different directions all at once, and it was like, there's no one warband that can take advantage of all this. It was a very good idea with a very rough launch, but I'm glad they stuck with it.
Yeah, we talk about they have the opportunity to learn from what they release. So after that, there was Death and Taxes. Tommy Conboy came on to talk Kanan. That was cool. Yeah. And then, as usual, a far list being a big change, we have episode 53 is talking with Eric, who also goes by Eric. And I was talking about the new far list, and then kind of we took that again, like trying to take a different spin rather than going card by card. Anytime, like Skylar was talking about earlier, anytime there's far list drops, it involves changing your deck, and it perhaps, I mean, at the time where most of the where most of the restrictions land on universal cards. Warbands that rely on universal is a lot more like Wormspat or like Eyes of the Nine. They're sometimes disproportionately impacted by those. So we really wanted to find one of those warbands, and so that's how we kind of tried to take a look at that. Yeah.
And speaking of warbands that we constantly talk about on this podcast, Eyes of the Nine also has some distorted representation here, which is kind of funny to look at all in like one big list. Like, oh, whoops, we just keep talking about these guys. But we then finally get to the end of all these new releases. We made it. We are not dead. We are not been broken by the onslaught of releases, and we decide to come back to our evergreen series of topics again, and we bring Aaron back for the first time in a long time to talk.
Well, actually, this is not that Aaron.
This is different.
Yeah, this is my buddy Aaron.
Okay.
We had an extra set, and I handed that over to him and his son and said, just play it, and then come on and give us your thoughts.
Absolutely.
And so this was an idea that we don't often get to that often, but an episode specifically targeted at new players. And this is like, hey, if you're thinking about it, here's somebody who's brand new to the game. Here they are trying it out for basically the first time, and here's what the experience was like. And so this is intended as a document to be like, hey, look, if you have somebody who might be interested, have them check this out.
Yeah. And I believe it was with his son, and he was not young, but like young enough that it's like, this is maybe a stretch, but I think he really loved it, right?
Yeah.
So.
Sal was very good with the Wraith Creepers, and then quickly moved on to Rippas once he saw guys riding wolves. He thought that was way too cool.
That's Sal. Yeah. To come out later and join us as a cameo at one of our leagues.
Yeah.
I think he's come out twice total.
He's been out a couple times to play. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So some good stuff there. Shows that even with the complexity of the game, like it's still approachable. So don't ever feel like you shouldn't try to share with everyone who is interested. And then we're back to some control stuff, and What are we chatting here, Davey?
This is getting Matt from the Set the Tempo blog, which then moved on to Compaq, and I think Compaq is has now slowed down on it. But that was one of our favorite blogs at the time.
Yeah,
he'd released a great article about control play, and the idea was to try to cross pollinate, which we'll occasionally do, where we like, hey, there's this other content creator made something really cool. We're excited about it because we read or listened to their stuff, so let's double down on that. So maybe a year after Michael Carlin was on to talk control, we kind of revisit the subject in the context of a quite changed meta, maybe more than a year actually,
probably
with the pandemic, and just cover that again. So that was good. Then the final warband of Dire Chasm arrives. That would be Soul Raid. My joke was to always sing this as Soul Man, to the tune of Soul Man, which you're welcome. You're welcome, Josh.
It gets stuck in my head every time without fail.
yeah.
Got him.
Yeah, we had Mendargon for this one. Over from the Underdogs blog, and he really latched on to Soul Raid as a warband he wanted to champion, and I mean, he mission accomplished. He did so and did very well with them for a very long time. I think didn't put him down really until the season changeover. So
yeah, the story of Soul Raid is like one of my favorite warband stories, I would say. And I'm not talking their background, I'm talking like on release, it was one of these things where people are like, I don't think these guys are like, there was a real throw your hands up, I don't know what's going on with these guys. My impression, I may be remembering this wrong, but my impression was on their release, people didn't think they were that great, and that turned out to not be the case. And it was just, you needed the reps. Skylar, I know you've done a lot with these guys.
Oh yeah, they sailed straight into my heart. I remember reading Spinefin for the first time and being like, "What?" And I couldn't wait. We had such a small local scene at that point in time where Matt had recently started showing back up from the jazz ensemble, and he plays the Ideneth in AOS. So he jumped on this, and at that point in time, we were kind of striving as a group, unspoken rule, to not like duplicate war bands, to add to that variety every week. So I remember getting really excited about them, and then being like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna let this be Matt's thing." But Matt switched over to Wrathgorn, and eventually I picked up Soul Raid. I think I would have even picked him up a little faster because my initial excitement was so there, regardless of how weird they looked. But then they got hit with that phase 2 Inspire dilemma when the Harrow Deep rulebook dropped. So I was like, I'm gonna wait until that gets patched. And pretty shortly after that got patched, I picked him up and couldn't put him down.
Yeah.
And we were collectively never the same again.
Terrors of the tables. But yeah, I agree. There's like super fun warband, and really interesting to see that like go from like nothing to like absolute terrors, back down to nothing, and then like back up to somewhere in the middle. And just like, there's probably never been a warband that's quite all over the map like that.
One might say they ebbed and flowed out of favor.
Not to belabor these guys too much, but what I like about them is that, you know, I'd lose a game to Skylar playing as them, and I'm like, okay, these guys are super powerful. Like I'm going to take a turn, and then you start piloting them, and you're like, oh, this is actually really hard.
Yeah, like you need the reps.
It felt like it was easy mode for him on the other side, but it wasn't. Like you really need to know what you're doing, and that's a cool design.
Very cool.
I think that was a strength of Dire Chasm. There was a lot of warbands that required to get the reps in and have that practice.
I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah. Kanan's right. Like you can't just
Absolutely.
So
next up. We did another crossover here. Episode 57 was My Sweet Lore, and that's we did a crossover with the story phase. We covered the Dire Chasm anthology. Very different. Again, talking about trying to do things that other folks aren't doing.
just a pure dive into the background. I actually enjoyed this a lot. I don't think it got like the numbers that others did, but
no, but it was really good, and I enjoyed it, and it was fun to be able to have a chat with Aaron and Paul on our cast rather than like just joining them for story phase. So would do again.
They're gonna have to release more books. Then.
They would have to do that again, but they should. So if GW, if you're listening,
another innovation was episode 58, Phil.
Yeah. So we decided with this idea of combo having Blade Coven giving us this concept in a more structured way. That was like, okay, that's something that we could try building around. Let's see if we could do it on air. And so we tried out the concept of building a deck live for the first time. And to be fair,
this is specifically possible because Arena Mortis 2 had just dropped with a ton of support for combo.
Supports combo to a much greater extent than just the warband itself. And so able to take it and run at that point and see like, oh, what can we make work here? Yeah. Little behind the scenes, pull back the curtain. But even for these live builds, we tend to have like some pretty strong ideas going into it ahead of time. So it's not like purely live because otherwise we'd be there for hours. But we thought, hey, it's something to try, and people definitely liked it. So it's been cool. It's given us, I think, more encouragement to try more experimental and different stuff, and something we will continue to do. And if there's something you hear that we do that's different and you like it, let us know so we know to do more of it.
Yeah, I think this is also because that was the drop of Arena Mortis 2. I think this is a good opportunity to open it up to the bigger group here. We probably played Arena Mortis a little bit more than most, but what was your take on that sort of Arena Mortis and Arena Mortis 2 experiment coming in Beastgrave and then Dire Chasm?
I was really disappointed when Gnarlwood dropped and there wasn't a Harrow Deep Nether Maze version.
Big fan then.
Yeah, it honestly led to some fun. Just look at the jank that I brought to like we would, because that's normally how we would kind of like do the intermission between leagues. Is we'd just be like, okay, we're gonna do like a week or 3 of Arena Mortis, and allows everybody to just kind of like play around with the cards in a new way, because a lot of the card pool that might not have been really viable in Championship, you could tap into for Arena Mortis and just be like, oh, but with this character, it's nuts. And that was a lot of fun. I didn't get to participate in this day, but never would have expected the strength of Black Powder in that season to come out with the monkey in
I was just about to get into that. I built a real nasty monkey build with Arena Mortis, and as I was putting it together, I was like, this is either going to be the stupidest thing that I've ever done, or I'm going to lose some friends at this league night.
Hey, why not both?
And well, you know what? It did end up being a little bit of both. I think I ended up breaking Alex's spirit with Arena Mortis because I think I didn't focus him down, but I'm pretty sure I broke at least, what was it?
You light fingered off, a ton of his.
Well, between light fingered and just other tech, like I leaned hard into breaking other people's upgrades, and I'm pretty sure I broke at least 5 to 8 upgrades off of him.
My God.
And I'm trying to remember what all jank was in there, but I think there was something I was. Oh yes, it was a suicide monkey. So I had some sort of upgrade that brought him down to 1 wound, and there was another one built into it where it did it gave me scything, but after I did the attack, I had to deal a damage to myself. It was just nuts. And that's part of what I loved about Arena Mortis, was that you could do some unconventional stuff and there was really no pressure to like win. It was just, hey, I'm going to do a dumb thing, and if it gets me a lot of glory throughout the course of the game, great. If not, oh no.
Yeah. I think the if you wanted to say there was a problem with Arena Mortis, it was that they were stuck trying to design cards for two things at the same time. Cards that are fun to play in Arena Mortis and cards that work in Championship. And I think that may be why we haven't seen it again.
Well, and I feel like that made it a bigger challenge for Championship because a lot of those ended up just being restricted hard. I think they did a better job with that in Arena Mortis 2. But there was still definitely some standouts. Meanwhile, the bulk of it was ignored by Championship. But also, interestingly, is I think Arena Mortis is the most played Relic format. Because if you were to put great strength on somebody and somebody else puts great strength on it, the person who had it previously breaks theirs. So it really rewarded having older cards that did effectively the same thing, but were less likely to see copies.
Right. Sure. And I don't know if that would be a great idea for Championship, but I really would like to see kind of some thoughts behind why that isn't employed, because I think that's fascinating.
Oh, copy breaks?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, you wouldn't need restricted cards then.
something to stash away in the old idea folder.
We had, after that, we were getting ready for another season change and another realm change, going from the realm of Beasker to Ulgu. So we spent a couple episodes, 59 and 60, talking about preparing for that rotation. Like, what are we going to do? What are we going to cut from our decks? What did Dire Chasm / season 4 look like? All leading up to episode 61, Phil. And that was...
Yeah. So we get the actual Harrow Deep drop, and we find out that we're moving to a whole different world where we got gloom tokens and delving, and objectives go face down, and like completely turns the whole meta on its head. Because as Davey had mentioned, to this point, hold objectives was pretty prevalent. Aggro was strong, but hold was still around as like one of the big competitors, and this changed a lot of how people had to approach the game, because you couldn't score a lot of those hold surges without doing a lot of extra work. So, this was a big shift. There's actually some other rules changes that happened in here with like inspire timing and adding more windows for all the different reactions and stuff to just spell out a lot of stuff, which had some ripple effects across the game. So,
but it is funny that just a small rule change, like the objectives being face down and being able to delve them and such, all of a sudden creates a world where, guess what? You have to restrict a Sepulchral Guard card.
Yeah. Some funny unintended consequences where it's like, oh, hold all the objectives. Well, look at that. There's only one of them.
That's one of my favorite things about that rule change, is it just recontextualized everything that came before and flipped it on its head. And all of a sudden you were looking at cards that you never ran before, and things like
making a statement.
Yep. All of the great things like unintentionally kneecapping Kagras.
Alex is so sad. But yeah.
And for us, that was a significant release for us, because we had never known the game without Beastgrave. That was always in the card pool because that's the season we came in on. So this was it finally rotating out, and our first time seeing the game without it. And I remember just being absolutely excited to experience a turnover like that in the card pool.
Yeah. As you can imagine with that, we take a look at some of the warbands there. We set up a content creator challenge where we were going to go head to head with Matt from Set the Tempo. So we did a live build of a Cunning Crew deck. And then I think our first battle report that we had done, and that was also another innovation that people seemed to enjoy. We had I kind of emceed a recap of a battle with the True Seekers from Matt playing our build of the Cunning Crew. And it was a way to kind of move through a game and really explain the thinking and kind of get in the decision-making process, which I think is kind of a fun watching a game as it plays out is fun because you're seeing it live, or not live, but you're seeing it as things happen, but you don't get the thought process like you can with this.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So that was pretty cool. We had identified that hold objective play was really shaken up, so that represented our episode 64.
Yeah. Holding in the Deep, we're talking deep dive on where does hold objective play go now? What does gloom mean? And this is actually about the 3rd anniversary of the podcast when we're recording this. We missed the 2nd anniversary. If for folks who didn't notice us mention it, it's because it was during the pandemic, unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah, so 3 years of recording, and we're still talking hold objectives, and very different world though, and it was pretty fun. I don't remember all of our conclusions, but I think it's a lot of the same stuff we just said, where it was like, oh, it was so much harder, but you have these new cards that you can use. So some interesting changes. It didn't actually die. It just had to adapt pretty heavily, and it took a little while to get there.
Yeah.
After that, we get into, I think our first episode was Skylar, and Skylar, you're on to help us talk about teaching the game to new players.
Indeed. I was hosting a bunch of events at my house with friends that I thought would be interested in the game, because we had just experienced Dire Chasm, in a vacuum, it felt like. And Brian, Josh, and I could not stop geeking out about how good we thought the warbands were in that season. It was our favorite season to date, and it was such a shame that it wasn't seeing tournament support given to global events. And we wanted to reach out to everyone that we could, that we knew, and try to host these demo days. And so I'd been doing a lot of that, and we saw people coming out. I started either shortly before this or shortly after this, I started doing the teaching events out and about in the area. And I remember when you guys asked me to come on, I'd never considered being a guest before. So it felt like an honor at the time to be a part of the podcast. And hey,
squealed.
It still does. Oh yeah, I definitely called up Brian and was like, guess what? Oh, wait a minute. No, that's actually false. I kept it to myself. And, and I waited. I was waiting for him to listen to the episode and message me and be like, you son of a... And he never did. He double played me. He listened to the episode and was like, oh, Skylar's been playing this one close to his chest. I'm not going to let him know that I've been listening.
That's
was
what
that the
keeps
time
this
that you
team a
left
team.
something in my mailbox?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Good times.
Wow.
Prompting my friends to listen to the episode.
Amazing. Well, our next one was we're right at the start of 2022. Phil and I got together just to we rarely do this sort of thing, but we were like, here's our episode full of guesses, anticipations, wild speculation about what does Harrow Deep and Beyond have for us. As at this time, we could see that the roadmap said there were only 4 warbands that were going to be associated with Harrow Deep, so there were a lot of unknowns that we were going to try and talk our way through. I will say I was feeling more pressure. So this happened to us a few times where, one of us would be traveling or on the road. And so we'd either have to make, these big concessions, like let's record way in advance, or I would try to record from like inside a closet while we're on the road. I mean, a literal closet.
Yeah.
And this is where the first inkling of like, maybe we want some more folks on here just so that we're not stuck giving bad content either because of recording quality or because of having to record so far in advance. So that's kind of where the first idea salted into my brain for that. The next one, in our tradition of revisiting our favorite things, Phil, episode 67.
Yeah. And I think this one, I mean, yes, it is revisiting Starblood, which is something I'm always willing to do. But I think we were also using this as an opportunity to discuss a warband that likes to hold objectives in a meta that does not make it easy for you, and sort of how do they fit into this flip tech and using Gloom tokens. So a different take there. We have a note that Starblood was winning events at this time. I don't remember which event it was, though.
Online events, because there weren't big ones. So there was some online clashes / invitationals sort of thing.
I guess it probably bears mentioning the pandemic sort of sparked a online growth boom, and there was a lot of online events happening for the last year or so at this point of our recordings, and there was a lot of online tournaments and online like leagues and stuff like that. So some good stuff, but I mean the level of competition ended up being very high in all of those because it's people from all over the world who are super dedicated to the game. So lots of interesting information, nothing that I was super keen to jump in on myself, but at this time, we were also waiting on Black Powder. We knew that they were coming. I personally was excited for the concept. I thought a pirate ogre sounded really, really cool. And then our next episode was, in fact, the rundown of said Black Powder. And I don't know if you remember your first reaction, Davey, or guys, if you remember any of yours, but I was a little disappointed.
Yeah,
I was absolutely whelmed.
I remember everybody was so fearful that they were Hrothgorn 2.0 and that we were going to have another big boy turret be a problem.
So that's what I remember about it the most. Was I was excited that it looked like they were pulling some of his power out of this absolute titan of a man and putting it into the rest of the warband, kind of having the pairings where it's like, if this fighter is close to this fighter, this can be accomplished. So it was and then like the light fingering reaction being the thing that his warband is doing outside of himself, so they have to go loot and get him his ammo. I thought, they're solving it. Like, this is going to be the solution to Hrothgorn and Mollog. But that was my initial feeling, right? And we all know that he kind of got shelved in the public eye for a while.
Yeah,
until this beta rule, which I think maybe gets him relevant again to some extent.
Absolutely,
it's pretty exciting. Coming out right about at the same time was that Illusory Might. It's our second standalone Rivals deck that we'd seen. This was definitely like an improvement, as in it felt more cohesive. There still were some weird choices. Famously, we talk about the gambit that says, you can get an upgrade out for free. Was it Desperate Bargain or something like that? You're like, well, this is the one deck that doesn't need to do that. Like, why would I do that? So, But Illusions being an innovation for the game, we still see them to some extent. Still building with them. I was using them just the other day with the kind of crew to get some powerful stuff out easily. It was pretty fun.
Yeah.
So that was cool. In the tradition, man, we finally had an ACON that we thought we were going to be able to go to. So ACON 2022, episode 70, we get Jimmy Molini on to talk about that. Getting ready for it. And that would occupy everything for the next few episodes except for 71, where we kind of take a little bit of a detour.
Yeah, we dive into the Grand Alliance cards and some of our hopes for what they could mean going forward. I think this was an episode, again, where we had a small enough number of these that we could really kind of run through all of them, or close to all of them. And I don't know about you. I am still very excited by the idea of Grand Alliance cards. It's like the perfect level of balance, because you can design cards for specific warbands where that, like, I can make this concept stronger because I know it won't go in this warband that tends to break that play style.
Yeah.
It is definitely one of my favorite new card ideas and like new mechanics, because like we've seen like Magic, Hunger, Hunter Quarry, and it's always kind of like hit or miss. This seems like honestly, it's like one of the best innovations to deck building, in my opinion.
I'm still holding out hope for Grand Alliance Rivals decks. I don't know if that's too specific for them to want to print, but that would be a cool way. We haven't seen them at all in Gnarlwood. No Grand Alliance cards so far.
None.
So hopefully they're not dead. They're still putting Grand Alliance symbols on fighter cards, so I think it's
probably still going to be around. I'm hoping that we get like maybe a whole card pack. If it's not decks, maybe like just a standalone release that's like, here's an infusion of cards that go in Championship. But we will see.
Right there with you.
And so, you know the drill. There's a preview. We're probably talking about them pretty soon. But we get through the rest of our Acon stuff. We actually have a breakdown after day one where we recorded in the hotel at Adepticon. Kind of a fun little recording. I was like super fried trying to record that, both mentally, but also like we'd been talking so much over the last 8 hours that like my voice was super shot. And I was just like, well, all right, let's just get through this. But it was fun. Good times.
72. We did a thing that we often do, which is we're leading up to a tournament, and we kind of like reveal all our secrets a little bit. Like you and I played a bat rep against each other, but it makes for good content, and it was fun for us to think about. 74, we've got Zach on, who is the second place with Spike Claw's Swarm, so it was cool to talk to him. He was just about to be a part of Path to Glory at that point, was not yet. And then straight on to Nether Maze. No guess for that. And there were a few, so it was still in the realm of Shadow. Any of you guys remember some of the like kind of big notables about this box, or any rules changes that felt significant at the time?
The rules changes were minimal, but the injection to the card pool at that time, I think, was significant. We went from an invading aggro meta and that term being coined to all of a sudden Nether Maze just opening up the season. This actually becomes my favorite season, and I think Brian's and Josh's as well, of all time thus far. And one of the reasons we fell in love with it was because it just offered such a strength and variety. This is the last time we really saw just tons of play styles that were constantly viable, war bands that the warband variety was that you would see out was just flush as well. It wasn't all who's the king of aggro at that time.
I thought a significant improvement was also that this is the point where all Rivals decks started carrying 6 surges. So because before that, through Harrow Deep, there was like Cunning Crew, I think, only has 4 surges. They started being consistent for a little while, of like 4 surges, 8 end phase or 3rd end phase. Before that, it was just all over the place. Where like Hrothgorn has he's got like 7 surges in his
8 surges.
What the hell?
And then an Annihilation clone. So
what's happening?
My favorite innovation of the season was the Mulligan rule.
Oh, that's big. Yeah, I love that.
God, crazy big rule.
Yeah.
Big.
It's really changed deck viability in my mind.
Changed deck viability, changed
end phases, or like third end phase cards.
Well, and the RNG of like I just drew bad to start, and so now like one of my best of 3 is I'm way behind the 8 ball on it. Great shift.
Yes. Hard to remember times before that. Now it feels like it should have always been that way.
It is crazy.
Remember having to drop your 3 cards and only having 9.
Yeah. There goes 6 of my glory for the game that I just will never get a chance at.
6+.
It's crazy how many changes you and I have kind of seen, Phil, and like how many of them seem like, I don't remember a time when that was the case, hardly, until somebody reminds you. So
absolutely.
We were in release deluge time again here because Exiled Dead was delayed or something. They ended up. I actually forget that Exiled Dead are a Harrow Deep warband because they released simultaneously with Nether Maze.
They were delayed a little bit, so they ended up dropping on the same time as the box, which was really unfortunate because they didn't get They didn't get their time.
Still struggling with the COVID logistics era.
What do you mean they didn't get their time?
Well, before we had other stuff to look at. I mean, people still played them a bunch, but that's different.
Oh, you mean like on air? I get you.
Yeah. There may be more time for him coming with this Beastbound Assault.
Yeah.
They clearly are the ones who like a lot of that stuff.
Should be interesting.
You been looking at my kitchen table there, Davey?
I mean,
yes.
If you'd stop bumping the hidden camera, I would have a better view of it.
Sorry, I'll be sure to get the angle right next time.
Yeah, thank you.
Sneaking in there to adjust the focus every night.
This got creepy. With this Deluge release, it kind of dictates a lot of our release schedule again. So we have Nethermaid's Universals in episode 76. We have another live build of the Exiled Dead in 77. And then 78, that's Brian's debut on the podcast as a guest. Brian and Phil. What was... Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Am I remember right? Phil was Dantalos and Brian took the assassin rats.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And they definitely assassined.
Oh yeah.
Oh, they did. The thing that I remember when we had Exile did first come out is that they were another one of those tricky warbands where just reading it was kind of like, I'm not 100% sure how good this is going to be. And then very quickly we realized that, they're going to be great. They're going to do all sorts of nasty stuff once people figured it out. But it allows for a much different play style than just like straightforward hold or control, and that's cool. And it's a good thing to have in the game where you have to like think a little bit more about the warband to figure out how they work. So
I mean, I'll say this: when you play with or against Exiled Dead, it feels like you're playing like a slightly different edition of the game. Like it feels like I'm playing a game that is like, I don't know, like Underworlds 1.05 or something like that, where like it's just such a different game than playing almost any other faction because of the way they move and attack, and the resurrection and action efficiency is so weird. And it really feels like that's not a game you can be like, well, I've practiced against Sepulchral Guard, so I kind of get how this goes. Like, no, you can't really play against anyone. To prep for Exiled Dead, you have to play against Exiled Dead.
And it bears mentioning that this was when their rules hadn't been changed yet, so they blocked all reactions during their special action as well. So really messed up a whole bunch of stuff and made for some really, really tough rules conundrums that we needed a lot of answers to. So interesting release. Anything you remember about this, Brian, that is worth mentioning?
I think soon after this is when I was like pitching the idea to my fiance, and she's been playing rats since. So
it's true.
Yeah,
lots of repping for them rats. It's just good to see. Good to see. Don't get a lot of Skaven out in our normal group besides her. Yeah. So then we're on to episode 79. We got some hidden gems. What are we? What craziness are we doing here?
This was we put out a request for listener submissions, like what do people think were overlooked cards, and that's the sort of thing that's kind of fun to do every once in a while. We finally had, basically we were curating that list while we were working our way through the huge backlog of new content, and got to cover what people thought. And it's that sort of fun, like, well, why is this card an interesting thing? I think it's something we'll definitely return to before too much longer. Just what are kind of cute tricks. We have our more cute than good. It's a way to get to talk about those instead of just the stuff that's hyper optimized or all that sort of thing. It's tough because then people have to give up their secrets if they want to, a hidden gem is not hidden if it's told to everybody.
True.
But speaking of revisiting things, episode 80.
We finally, at long last, we decided that it's about time to dust off the resources page of our website and give it actual links and cover all the new community resources that had been created in the last almost 4 years at this point. So we have more updated community resources available. We discussed some of our takes on all those different groups in making content in the community and just trying to give people a lay of the land. Pretty straightforward. I'm sure something we'll have to update again at some point, although now that we have links, we can probably just do a better job of maintaining it there.
And on that note, there's a refresh on the site as of this episode. Go take a look.
Oh, well, there you go.
With Skylar's efforts, we're going to try and keep that a little more current there. If you have a resource that you think should be on there that's not, let us know, because we'd be happy to include it. That's
good deal.
That's really just a thing to like let people know what all the stuff is, what all is out there. So
yeah, and then we
go ahead.
Yeah, we go on again to have a sort of revisit of a warband post clash win. Same kind of deal. We're talking ghouls this time, which is the first time we'd seen ghouls in a while.
Yeah. It was fun. This was one of those things where we hit that topic because I had spent a lot of time with ghouls, saw somebody do well with them. I had been kind of bemoaning the fact that I felt like they struggled, and I was like, well, I guess they don't struggle that much if Nick Ramone. To be fair, Nick Ramone is like the ghoul king.
He's
like
very good.
There's few people with as many reps as him, but it's that idea of getting the expert. One of the last guests we had on, perhaps actually, until quite a bit later. But this is really where we've kind of slowed down on guests because we're gearing up for a personnel change. But before that, we get some White Dwarf content. This is Vainglorious Raiders and Patient Lurkers. So we talked about this in episode 82. What do you guys think about? Do you think we're going to see this again? What did you think about having this? Was this the right call at the time?
I think it was a decent holdover, like get you by situation, but it was poorly executed, a little half baked. I mean, anything to get the game rolling again after the pandemic. So any port in a storm, and I think in this case,
I'd agree with that. If you're going to try and spin up that Rivals or Nemesis was not called such at the time, but if you're going to try and spin up those formats, you needed more options out there.
Yeah. There's not a lot else to say about it, really. It's just it was fleshing out the total card pool if you wanted to play Nemesis, which was good. I mean, they were probably looking forward to where the game was going, and we didn't know it, and so it makes sense in retrospect. But at the time, it was kind of like, oh, this is kind of cool. I don't understand why some of these cards are in here, but
yeah. I mean, I think we talked about it at the time too. It was almost practice, right? So like, let's just practice with like a low stakes White Dwarf article, and then have a better chance of getting it right. And I you can find faults or say that the current Universal Rivals decks are not perfect, but they are a lot more functional than what we saw early on.
Yeah, a great improvement.
Absolutely.
And,
I almost don't want to mention this, but episode 83 was another Reavers episode. So
and this one, I think, unlike some of our other deep dives into Khorne warbands, this was mostly because I was trying a thing where I was like, okay, I'm going to play super weird stuff because there's some of this weird tech where you can take advantage of like not being in cover, because everything at the time was like, I'm going to be in cover, I'm going to stand in cover, I'm going to be on feature tokens. And it was like, what if I zig while everybody else is zagging? And did this weird Suicide Reavers build that actually worked very well for the most part against some really high level.
Fun to see.
Against some really high level players. Jimmy definitely showed me what was what when I tried it against his Sepulchral Guard, but it was effective and different, and I think that was more the focus here. Is like, how do we do this aggro thing in an era of flipping? Because flip tech was the like main form of the meta at the time. So maybe unfortunate that it was Reavers again, but
well, it was you. And it was definitely a mad science build for sure. And it made a wave in our local. Like everybody loved seeing it. It was often victorious, and it was just the variety of it was shocking because nobody was playing anything like that at that time.
Yeah. And it's no longer viable because they've restricted some of the cards that it relied on and rotated others out. So it is fully dead at this point. But it was fun when it lasted.
Sounds like we just need another Reavers episode.
I was going to say, when we get to the 6th Reavers episode, is it what the Garricks?
Well, I mean, we probably have to save that for 8, right? But no, let's maybe we can put a moratorium on Khorne until there's a new Khorne warband.
All right, fair enough.
So that won't take long.
Speaking of, but no. So next up we have Hexbanes coming out. Dave, I know you've really loved these guys. What was happening here? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was just they almost pair with that Reavers idea of like, hey, we get some energy off of losing people. I liked that they ended up being extremely powerful, and I think we misjudged just how powerful they would be on that initial assessment. But it did feel like a one where like the more reps, the more tricks you can learn, the more tricks you learn, the more powerful they are. So 84 and 85 were covering their release and then building a deck with them. And in that time, then we saw another warband. So Bleed, Pray, Love for episode 86 saw Gore Chosen arrive. It was we built this one, did a live build with this. This is another one where kind of that timing was tricky because there was some travel going on. So again, something that as will about to be the case, have more hosts to help us get through that sort of hiccup. But episode 87, that was the arrival. Phil was actually out for this episode, but it was the arrival of our 3 new hosts. So Josh, Skylar, and Brian were on for this, and it was for a bat rep between I was playing Shadeborn and Brian was playing Gore Chosen.
And we were collectively never the same again.
We 3 forever tied to those 3.
I don't remember exactly how we pitched it to you guys. I think you guys had been so involved that I was like, you know what, like let's get these guys on either as a recurring part of us or like help you guys stand up your own thing. And I think we talk about it some in some
Absolutely.
of those episodes, but yeah.
As I told the Battle Mallet guys on our crossover episode,
there it
they
is.
drugged us.
Yeah.
Skylar told me there'd be candy, and I've yet to collect on that.
Dirty
so
tricks.
But ice cream.
A shout out to that crossover with the Battle Mallet podcast. Davey goes on later to say, I think you introduced our new hosts better than I did.
Yeah. As I remember listening to you guys on that, I was like, oh, I don't think we ever like asked these guys, like, tell us some of your background, because we were just like, no time, jumping in, content now, go.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But then you're in episode 88, full crew for the first time, right?
This was the review of Nethermaze and Heroddeep retrospective. This one was fun because we were reviewing, and I think I brought it up here to the all the changes that happened between Heroddeep and Nethermaze and what might Gnarlwood hold in store for us. We really went back through the development of the game. I think I even broke down like how Magic is doing, Hunger, Hunter Quarry, and we were really high on the Grand Alliance cards. We thought that was going to continue, trying to do some forecasting for what was going to be happening in Gnarlwood.
Yeah. Little did we know.
Little did we know.
I was going to say, I think one of the things that I kind of missed the most upon reviewing this episode is one of the things that Nethermaze and Heroddeep did really well was encouraging people to engage with the new mechanics. So cover and gloom hexes and all of that was something that they did really well from a design standpoint, and I'm really hoping that Next Wood brings something like that.
We'll see. I mean, I have some hope now that we've seen a deck that doesn't have a plot card that will get back to that world. But man, we were in for a seismic shift as we are yanked back into Gur and not expecting any of this. But yeah, so our next few episodes were all focused around the new Gnarlwood box, and yeah, we were not prepared. Davey and I. So Davey got his hands on the rulebook first and bravely read through everything he could to try and catch all of the changes that happened. And
missed a ton of them.
We missed tons.
How could you?
There's so much that changed between Nether Maze and Gnarlwood, which is
Like what?
pretty crazy. Well, if you'd like to know, you can go back and listen to episode 89 and read some of the addendums that we had to have.
I will say I'm a little surprised that the change to the move and charge mechanics haven't been as tectonic as I would have thought.
What?
Oh boy, jot this one down for debate-isode. It sounds like there's some strong opinions.
I've seen it some warbands. It's an invisible change. Other warbands, like I don't know, 3 big beefy corn boys really get a lot out of the charge thing.
Man,
Yeah,
so
no kidding.
If the rules
it
had
depends
not
on-
changed for them, I think they'd be in a very different spot right now.
Yeah, and I think there's a really healthy shift with delving where that was a little out of control. How often tokens were getting flipped back and forth. So.
Every power step, maybe multiple
there'd be-
times.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that was Gnarlwood, and we also kicked it off with a guest spot from on our next one, episode 90. We brought Jared in to have Phil and the Battle Mallet rep throw down for the Bat Mal Bat rep, which turns out it's a little lopsided.
A little bit. Sorry, Jared. Yeah, we both build Nemesis decks, and he had Valmorans, I had Gnarl Spirit Pack, and it was not close. Which, as we know now, that is not an aberration. That is just kind of how that box turned out.
Indeed, it's so close to being this like perfect introductory product too. I love that it included 2 Nemesis, functional rivals decks in it as the universals, so that you could hand this to somebody and they could not only play rivals, but then they could deck build that Nemesis experience with either deck, and so it was a lot of game in one package. It's just the balance between Gnarl Spirit and Valmorn's a little rough for that introductory product.
Absolutely.
I don't think a little rough properly encapsulates that power skew.
The just massive gulf that is between them.
And then timeline-wise, this is when Brian and I are tossed at Battle Mallet to return the crossover favor.
Yeah.
And
bonus episode over there.
Yeah. Welcomed in with... we're welcomed in.
There, that's the best we can
Welcomed
say.
in with metaphor.
Best words.
The blank.
I had to do my best to hold my God-sworn hunt opinions at bay the entire episode.
Yeah.
And we continued the coverage then. Davey and Josh did another live deck build for Valmoran for Championship. This was kind of before we knew that the world was shifting towards Nemesis.
Quite as heavily, and also in keeping with our tendency to want to talk about the things that isn't being talked about as much. So let's give Valmorn a little attention.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about Gnarl Spirit. Yeah,
make them feel loved. So after that, we were off of new releases for a little bit, and we decided that a cool thing that we could do, because it feels like a strength of our community, is talk through how our league was built and run and what folks could do to run their own league. Skylar, you've been pretty much running with this, so I think this is yours to recap.
Sure. I outline our league process in this episode, as well as I just give tips and tricks for best ways to just stir up your local scene. And spoilers, it comes down to consistently doing it, and it can be thankless, and sometimes it can feel defeating, when you're out and nobody shows up. But sticking with it and representing it with joy and excitement can be contagious. People rely on that consistency. They know where to find you. And if you're consistently excited, it's going to generate excitement and people are going to come in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Davey, we wouldn't know anything about having to have just played against, one other person for a while.
Yeah. A long while. Magoras versus Farstriders for forever.
Yeah. Forever. Yeah. But the reprieve from new releases is short-lived. We're on to Loon Court almost right away. And we get a rundown. We also have Fearsome Fortress. The new deck is cool to break down. The two releases don't really go together, unfortunately. So there wasn't a whole lot to do there. But it did feel like at this point that the releases have now been pretty consistent timing-wise and content-wise for Gnarlwood after the main box. So it was like, okay, we're not getting stuff too close together. There's not big gulfs in releases. So I like this pace that we're on. I hope they can keep it pretty consistent now that shipping problems, fingers crossed, are not going to be too consistent anymore. And then next, Davey, you had another bat rep.
We did Sons of Elmorn into Loon Court. Brian and I throwing again. Is that the most common pairing for bat reports now?
I think so.
Yeah. All right. We'll have to keep that in mind.
It's happened. I think that's the third time. So, yeah.
And then another another shameless thievery.
Yeah.
We stole from chatting the late great chatting crit for 47 hammers at our first debate-isode, where we talked about, are there too many war bands and what should we do about that? And it was you and me, Josh, is it?
Yeah, I don't remember which sides we ended on, but I know yours was wrong. That's all I remember from that episode.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Definitely a cool concept. I think we got a lot of really cool feedback from people about this as well.
Yeah.
I think maybe the most feedback we've gotten on an episode before. So definitely.
Just about. And it wasn't just, like, I like that or didn't like that. It was people kind of pitching their own, like, hey, here's what I thought about that, or here's, all that sort of thing. So like, seemed to stimulate a lot of conversation one way or the other.
I'm definitely excited to do more episodes like that.
Agreed. I really wish I could have been on this one.
Well, I think we can make that happen. We've just in this episode gotten some new ideas. So we move on to our Nemisode. We are talking the Nemesis world that we are living in. And so we take a moment to break down what we thought seemed to be the meta for Nemesis and sort of what things you could be looking for to try and succeed in the format. This is along with the backdrop of Adepticon being a Nemesis format.
On the horizon.
Yeah, this is kind of this year's Road to Adepticon episode.
Yes, absolutely is. And less explicitly, but it is certainly that case. And we are trying to chat about what are the things to consider. This format is relatively new. So what is it that you should be trying to do and what we think are going to be the strong contenders? I think our most recent league would show that we maybe don't have that picture fully figured out, but Gnarl Spirit Pack is still definitely something to consider, and aggro is also highly represented. So holds true enough. And then we failed to mention it earlier, but we were prepping for our local tournament around the same time, our Madtown Throwdown, which I think is now coined term that we're probably going to run with. And we have a recap here for episode 97 where we just talk through our tournament, how it went. We didn't have as many people show up as we would have hoped, but it was still a pretty good turnout, and it was champs, so it was probably the last time any of us played championship for the last good number of weeks.
It was a
I will
nice
tell you,
experiment. A nice experiment into the plot locked championship environment.
and I'll tell you this: I don't know how many of you have tried to go back to making championship decks after a couple months of Nemesis play. It was like, whoa, this is actually scary. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here. Like, this is so many more options. I think the listener takeaway on this, though, is that those Mad Town Throwdowns, it's our intention to continue them quarterly. We'll kind of rotate formats.
Yep.
And even at our lowest attendance levels, you'll still be in like the 6, 7, 8 kind of realm as soon as we get people from out of town. So you can count on at least 6 or so of us locally being there, which makes for a decent one-day or local event.
Absolutely.
So anytime you see it on the calendar, you can feel confident you can come and get a good variety of games.
Yeah, we always have a good time. So if you're just feeling like throwing some dice, just come and hang out. We would appreciate having more folks join us. It's been fun. We've had more people in the past, and it was always a blast. So stay tuned. We'll get another one of those on the books. We've talked about it, haven't scheduled it quite yet, but should be coming.
98 with the beta rules coming out for warbands, both for Gnarl Spirit and Black Powder. Thought we'd test those again rather than just talk about the beta rules. Let's put them into play. Let's kind of try something different. And then if you're listening to this, episode 99 was just about Slaughter Daughters. Is about the Aranai. And theoretically, what closes out Gnarlwood. I don't think we're tracking any other releases. We didn't have Beastbound Assault in hand. We do now. There's a lot out there, so in our way, choosing how to cover it will kind of depend if we think there's more to be said or if we think everything that needs to be said has been said. So TBD.
Yeah.
And that brings us up to episode 100, where we are now.
What are we covering on that one?
Well, let's bring it back to the start and just
episode 100 we covered.
Yes. But yeah, so a quick jaunt through memory lane for folks.
Quick in air quotes.
Quick, yes, in quotes. I mean, as quickly as you can cover 5 years of a game, when you're trying to break it down, in these bi-weekly chunks, but
turns out just shy of 3 hours.
Hey, letting them in on those secrets. But it's been a fun journey for folks who haven't been around since the game started. I have never lost interest in this game. It's one of those games where I feel like there's always been something new, something different to try out. All the releases have always been interesting, even if I don't end up playing them. And I really love the combination of the deck building and the miniatures. And I have felt honored to be a part of this podcast and to be able to call this community our own. I think we've built something that's pretty great, and glad to have you guys along for the journey.
Yeah.
I know we've been a little late to the party, but it's definitely been great becoming part of the community to the point of, I don't know, being willing to share my garbage opinions in front of a microphone.
Getting over all my stammering and stuttering.
No, still not over that.
Well, a work in progress, and one I will.
No, I mean I'm not over that.
Oh, understood. But I find myself on a podcast, which is something I've always wanted to do, with the best crew I could be on with. I enjoy your guys' company and opinion so much. It's great to be a part of this, and I'm willing to put in the work to work through my stammering and stuttering and sit here and listen to Josh's opinions and bite my tongue a little, allow him his air.
And he sticks the landing.
Well, I'll say this, looking forward to what we get to do going forward. I think we got a good crew, and I think we're going to continue to provide a lot of good stuff for the listeners as Nextwood, as we've been calling it, arrives and on from there. We're excited about Adepticon. It'll be our second time getting to go as a cohesive crew. So that's going to be pretty awesome.
Speaking of looking forward and bad segues, y'all want to draw some Trashfire tournaments?
Yeah. So as mentioned, we were looking for a way to celebrate, and it's going to be by playing an in-house tournament, and we will not have control over what we're taking. So, Josh, why don't you take us away? You've assembled yourself a giant paper mache hat and thrown all the options into that. So
Absolutely. So
right.
I think in the spirit of this game, do y'all have your dice close at hand?
Yeah,
I have
do
a
indeed.
die. It is not.
Are you talking attack and defense die, or what are we?
So I'm thinking we roll off for who draws first.
Okay.
Rolling off. Well, I unfortunately don't have those dice to hand. They're in my box someplace. I don't want to go find them.
I've got you.
I was about to say,
Do you
Brian
guys trust
can.
me throwing the results out?
Oh, I trust you. I
I don't know if I trust you in general, but with dice,
I
yeah.
don't think you're gonna cheat this.
All right, so we're looking for the high roll for crits and such.
Yep, that's what I'm
Magic
thinking.
sound.
Okay. Oh, we got some good Foley sound there.
Oh yeah. All edited
All
in
right.
after the fact.
All right.
So I've got a single double.
Triple doubles.
I got
Okay.
I got nothing on the side.
I've got a single double. Really setting the world on fire here, guys.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? With all these crits. All right, so I think Davey, you and I roll off.
Okay. 2 crits and a double.
I have a double, sir, so you are going to go first.
Brian had a triple double. Skylar had nothing at all.
Skylar had nothing. All right.
And we need a roll for Phil here.
It's true. I
I got you, Phil.
Here you go.
Brian.
Here you go.
Oh,
I got
Brian. Okay.
you. Single double.
okay.
All right, so that sounds to me like Phil's the first draw, then
Phil's
Brian,
first draw.
then me, then Josh, then Skylar.
Yep.
All right.
Saving
Cool,
the best for last.
All right, let's get to drawing then. So first up, Phil, you are going to be working with. Drum roll, please, Davey. If you've got that sweet editing magic, you're going to be working with a deck from Console/Nickel,
Okay.
and that'll be the Vault's Mysterium deck.
Ooh, all right. Get your
okay.
magic on.
So seems like you got the flex to work with whatever warband you want, so long as it includes Vault's Mysterium.
Okay. All right. I
boy.
can do
All right.
this.
Phil just does Gnarl Spirit Pack with like one gambit left.
Okay. So next up, Brian, you are going to be working with a deck from Anders. You are going to be rocking the Turret Vortimus build.
Oh, God.
Oh, that's interesting.
Got him.
Okay, so
Sweet justice.
Yes.
so I won't run eyes then for Vault's Mysterium.
Oh,
All right. And
You're
Davey,
welcome.
you're up.
Thedra Magic build. Come on, Thedra Magic build.
We are going to be rocking Davey with from Leathanem, the Ella Fitzgerald song inspired Black Magic build.
Is that what that is? I'm gonna have to get in touch with him.
Yeah,
see
I don't know what
Black
that
Magic
means.
It was I think he might have had some sort of implications with it, but that was all that I got out of the thread we had there. So
All right, I'll get in
maybe
touch
touch
with him.
base and see what he had in mind.
Is that Thedra? Is that Thedra Magic? Did I do it?
Maybe.
Did you will that into existence?
I think you did.
All right. Next up is me. I'm going to be rocking. All right. This is from Joe Cody. This is a bit of an odd one, and I'm excited about it. So this is the Relic Rule Breaker. So
Oh, interesting.
I am
like
going
this
to be
one.
working in the Relic format. The kind of hinge here is I can only use cards where my warband is in the picture.
Oh, I love it so much.
So that's going to be a bit of a brain bender, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
That'll be good.
And
one.
then last and certainly least, we've got Skylar. I'm just kidding. I love you, man. All right. He's going to be rocking from our titular sponsor here, Sleek's Bowls Black Powder Maps build.
Oh, snap. All right.
There it is.
Okay.
Here we go.
So sounds like some fun stuff. I don't think anybody dreading their pick or really looking forward to their pick.
I am looking forward to finding out what my pick was.
It sounds like we're gonna have 3 decks running Magic though, so that's cool.
That's exciting.
Very meta relevant.
Very.
Well, we are going to get, some of us have some constructing to do, some of us have some real head scratching to do. Good luck with that endeavor, Josh. I think that might be like for episode 200, we all do that relic style. That's pretty crazy.
I would love that.
Oh, relic rule breaker.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
And we need to start wrapping it up. So
absolutely.
As you all know at this point, you can get in touch with us. We're whatthehexcast@gmail.com, at WTHcast, or most commonly, people will hit us up on our in-house Discord, where you can get involved with any of the stuff from the network. We have coming up, we are going to bring you some of this coverage of the Sleeks Bowl that we are doing here. And also Adepticon is racing at us, and any new releases will also have to be handled. So we'll adapt to that as it arrives. Brian, I believe you have the Flavitex quiz for us.
Yes, I do. All right. This quote is not attributed to anyone.
Okay.
Time has many paths. Some are dead ends.
Oof.
Frozen in time.
Well, is it?
Maybe.
Let me know when you want a clue.
Was
that the right
was
guess?
Phil wrong?
It is not Frozen in Time.
Okay. Well,
okay.
There we go.
All right.
It is.
Yeah, hit us with a clue.
Relic.
Okay. So it's something that's rotated out.
It is the same text on all 3 printings.
Oh, is this Branching Fate?
Nope.
Ooh,
No.
that's such a good guess.
Yeah.
Time has many paths. Some are dead ends.
Okay. I think we take one more guess and then we're done.
It is in the Essentials pack.
Okay. It can't be Annihilation.
The dead end. Oh man, I'm coming up with nothing off the top of my dome here.
Is it? What's it called?
Give us objective gambit.
It is a ploy.
Is a ploy.
Mirror move?
No, because that hasn't been printed 3 times.
Oh yes, you're right.
Yeah. No time.
No time.
There it is.
There it is. I was close. I guess I should have been thinking more time cards.
Yeah.
Cool. Good one.
All right. Cool. Let's see. For your recommended listening, this is going to be the title track of the album "Still Standing" by Goody Mob, and that's to Tip of the Hat to 100. Thanks everybody for What the Hex. I've been Davey.
I've been Phil.
I've been Skylar.
I've been Josh.
I've been Brian.
Scott, do you remember? You want to take this one?
Sure.
Pop quiz.
No, take your time.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Brian, do you want to take this one?
Got him.
I don't want to steal your thunder. But
I couldn't have covered that episode recap any better.
You didn't.
Not expecting any of this.
There's smoke in the living room. The alarm may sound.
okay, who's dying?
I was about to say, who's got smoke in the living room?
Yeah, I tried to hit pause on that as quick as I could. It smells like something just in the oven.
Oh,
That'll be fine. Keep going.
yeah.
So you're cooking?
Don't check on that.
I'm not.